Chapter 744. Ignorant boy, how dare you trap and kill us with a star formation? Among the dozens of trapped men and women, a man and a woman laughed complacently. Within a radius of 100 miles, starlight filled the air, and the murderous power of the stars turned into a silver void that enveloped everything. Looking around, it was all silver, and no one knew where they were. But none of these men and women panicked. Everyone laughed along with the man and woman. Even Baiju, who had more than half of his body covered by the purple-black poisonous gas and was trembling with pain, was laughing complacently, as if it was a joke that Wu Qi had trapped them with a star formation. Amidst their laughter, the man and woman suddenly transformed into two silver rhinoceroses, each one 1,000 feet tall and over 2,000 feet long. They had 3 extremely sharp pale golden horns on their heads, which were translucent, and one could vaguely see countless golden clouds rolling around them. Their horns were crystal clear, and there seemed to be a mass of liquid rolling inside them, which seemed to be seeping out of them. Even Huang Liang, who knew nothing about treasures in the universe, had his eyes lit up. The 6 horns of the couple were definitely rare treasures. Apart from the 6 golden horns that seemed to be full of liquid, the silver rhinoceroses' skins were also amazing. The surface of the shiny silver skins was actually reflecting the light of countless stars, and there were countless layers of starlight spreading and growing inside the skins. Soon, a complete map of the stars was reflected on the skins. Wu Qi was shocked. These were 2 rare ancient beasts, star golden rhinoceroses. Star golden rhinoceroses were also divine beasts left behind from the chaos. But unlike powerful divine beasts like the azure dragon and the white tiger, star golden rhinoceroses could observe the sky and know the geography. They were born with the ability to control fate by observing the stars in the universe. If the azure dragon and the white tiger were the best generals among the divine beasts, then the star golden rhinoceroses were recognized as the brains of the innate divine beasts. Since ancient times, when the innate gods still ruled the world, and the divine beasts could also occupy their own territories, the star-striped golden rhinoceros clan often served as the strategists of many forces, big and small. They even became the masters of some forces, and all actions were based on their plans. However, after the rise of the human tribe, the immortal tribe split from the human tribe. The human tribe and the immortal tribe joined forces to defeat the innate deity and destroy the innate deity's rule over this world. That was when the tragic years of the star-striped golden rhinoceros came. Like dragon pythons of fire and ice, for those greedy immortals, every part of star golden rhinoceros was a treasure, and even their fur was the best material for making talisman brushes. So, after the human race occupied Pangu continent and the immortals occupied outer heavenly realms, the star golden rhinoceros race was almost wiped out in just 1 eon. As he quickly recalled the information about the star golden rhinoceros, Wu Qi laughed and said, "Well, just when I thought my formation was lacking a few formation flags to control the power of the stars, you've brought them to me. Well, your horns can be used to craft at least 36 formation flags, and your bones can be used to craft 1,080 star banners. How wonderful!" Amidst his laughter, Wu Qi slapped the back of his head, and the 9 nether ghost flame transformed into a giant hand that measured a few miles in circumference, grabbing at the 2-star golden rhinoceros with a frigid and evil aura. Wu Qi was overjoyed. If he could skin these 2-star golden rhinoceros and refine them into formation flags and star banners that could control the power of the stars, the power of his star formation would be increased by at least 10 times. Every hair on a star golden rhinoceros was born with the best combination of star power, and had the power to control the power of the stars. Of course, if he killed them after catching them, it would seem a little wasteful. Wu Qi blinked his eyes, then nodded and said, "Well, sustainable development is a scientific concept of development. You can't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Just be obedient and go to my livestock pen in the East Sea province to reproduce. I happen to have a prescription that can help you ancient divine beasts reproduce, and I can guarantee you a prosperous family." The 2-star golden rhinoceros were trembling with anger when they heard that Wu Qi was going to use them to craft formation flags and star banners, and when they heard that Wu Qi was going to rear them like livestock, they were even more furious. The tragic fate of the ancestors of the star golden rhinoceros was very famous among the divine beasts. After all, there were not many divine beasts who were as unlucky as them, who were hunted by countless immortals and almost wiped out. Wu Qi's words were tantamount to digging a hard knife into the scars of the entire star golden rhinoceros race, and the two star golden rhinoceros immediately went mad. Their 6 golden horns shot out a large sheet of golden light, which turned into a torrent and smashed into the 360 star beads floating above Wu Qi's head. Wherever the golden torrent passed, the starlight ejected from the star beads suddenly froze, and the originally agile star power became as solid as thin ice, shattered by the golden torrent. Crisp explosions rang out everywhere in the silver void, and before long, large cracks appeared in the silver void, through which one could see the beautiful scenery of green mountains and clear waters outside. The star-striped golden rhinoceros was worthy of being a remnant ancient beast. To them, mastering the power of the stars was as natural as eating and drinking for ordinary people. Any formation that was set up with the power of the stars was no secret to them. If what Wu Qi had laid out was a formation constructed with the power of the 5 elements, earth veins, or even ghosts and deities, it would not have been so easy for the 2-star golden rhinoceros to break it. But the star formation was too weak to withstand a single blow from them. The golden light ejected from their golden horns froze the star formation formed by Wu Qi's 360 star beads. Amidst the laughter of the other men and women, the 2-star golden rhinoceros took a deep breath, and their bodies suddenly expanded to tens of thousands of feet long. Countless stars flickered rapidly under their skin, and billions of starlight shot out of their skin. Countless specks of silver light wheeled around them like fireflies, and a vivid star map emerged out of thin air around them. However, it was obvious that the cultivation base of these 2-star golden rhinoceros was not strong enough. The star map they could activate probably only accounted for less than 10% of the stars in the sky, but its power was already frightening enough. Wherever those tiny specks of silver light passed, Wu Qi's formation quickly disintegrated, and the silver void was soon swept away. The 2-star golden rhinoceros laughed aloud and said, "Tan Lang, you little boy, we can break your star formation with just a flick of our fingers. What else do you have to rely on? You've laid out a myriad poisons formation and killed our beloved son. Today, we'll capture you first, and then we'll settle the score with the human emperor." The dozens of men and women who followed closely behind the rhinoceros roared in unison, "That's right. Let's capture this boy first, and then we'll settle the score with the human emperor. Even the current human emperor has no reason to kill our son for no reason." There was also a woman with a strong figure, a beautiful face, and a few faint animal tattoos on her cheeks. She snapped, "Even the great heavenly venerables of the celestial court are too lazy to get involved in the shady business between Yu and the union of 10,000 immortals. Why do you want to involve our son? Could it be that Yu is only afraid of the celestial court, and you think we're easy to bully?" The woman let out a furious roar and suddenly transformed into a pale golden leopard with 3 tails on its back. Then she pounced at Wu Qi. The woman sped through the air, covering a distance of thousands of feet in just a flash. Clearly, she had the ability to travel through the void, just like the heavenly ghost from the outer domain. With just a roar, the woman had arrived in front of Wu Qi. She opened her mouth and bit down at Wu Qi's head, while her 3 tails swept across the air. Immediately, rings of golden rings wrapped around Wu Qi's body. They were hazy, as if they were formed from mist, but each of them was as heavy as several dozens of mountains. Layer after layer, they came pressing down on Wu Qi, and with each additional layer, the pressure Wu Qi felt increased by 10 times. The divine beast, the earth spirit leopard, was born with the ability to control the power of earth. Its 3 tails could be used to draw runes in the air at will, and mobilize the power of the earth and mountains to suppress the enemy. Legend had it that the mountain-driving whip, an ancient treasure, was made from the tail of the earth spirit leopard, which gave it the ability to move mountains. Wu Qi gave a cold snort. Ignoring the leopard, he stared at the 2 complacent star golden rhinoceroses and said with a faint smile, "Oh? Is the innate divine ability of the star golden rhinoceros really so powerful? With a flick of his finger, 360 beams of silver light suddenly shot out of the top of Wu Qi's head and quickly disappeared into the 360 star pearls hovering above him. Suddenly, the silver void, which had been shattered by the torrents spewed out of the star-golden rhinoceros's horns, trembled. Amidst the rumbling of the stars, the silver torrents rolled back from all directions and completely froze the surrounding void in a blink of an eye. The two star-golden rhinoceroses were horrified. Strange. Why can't we recognize the star power this guy is driving? Did he borrow the power of that star's origin? But before they could say anything, the huge hand formed from the 9 nether ghost flame that Wu Qi had just unleashed had already grabbed the 2 star golden rhinoceroses, who were only 15th tier gold immortals, and casually thrown them into the Dark Aeon's celestial tower. The earth spirit leopard opened its mouth and swallowed them, then stabbed its sharp fangs into Wu Qi's neck. But a thick layer of black dragon scales quickly crept out from under Wu Qi's skin, and sparks flew when the leopard's fangs and scales brushed against each other. Although Wu Qi's neck was unscathed, the leopard's fangs cracked and had tiny gaps. What a tough neck! The leopard gave a miserable howl and retreated hastily with blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. Wu Qi chuckled. The silver light that blotted the sky merged together, and then 360 strange beasts, which no one had ever seen before, slowly revealed their true forms on the star pearls. The surging evil power of the stars whizzed down, and the trapped divine beasts were thrown to different places in the formation. Bai Zhu, who was taking a detoxifying pill, cried out in alarm as a silver vortex emerged around him and dragged him to the core of the formation, where the star pressure was the strongest. Wu Qi strode to Bai Zhu's side, grabbed the top of his head, and punched him again and again. The surrounding void trembled violently as dozens of divine beasts returned to their original forms and bombarded the formation with their strongest force, trying to break out of it. Wu Qi bore all the counterforce, causing his internal organs to tremble violently, and the taste of blood kept coming out of his mouth. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed Bai Zhu, whose cultivation base had been greatly weakened by the poison, and began to beat him violently. As he beat Bai Zhu, Wu Qi looked back in the direction of Yuxiong Plain in surprise. Why haven't the garrison of Yuxiong Plain arrived yet? Haven't they noticed what's going on here? Chapter 745. A dazzling ball of starlight enveloped an area of 100 miles in circumference. Above the clouds high up in the sky, numerous stars were visible in broad daylight. Wisps of starlight poured down from the sky like smoke, fusing into the ball of starlight. The silhouettes of dozens of divine beasts and fowls could be seen running and flying amidst the silver light, filling the air with jarring noises. The starlight was trembling, and from time to time, dozens of colorful beams would shoot out of it, turning the mountains in the near and far into nothingness. 1,000 miles away, on a lofty mountain, stood a pitch-black flagpole over 30,000 meters tall. The huge flagpole was facing the strong wind in the sky, and a black flag that was 18,000 meters long and 9,000 meters wide was fluttering in the wind. Large clouds of black smoke spurted out from the flag, transforming into a huge, semi-transparent, hazy hand that covered the entire area with a circumference of 3,000 miles. All the energy fluctuations in the hand were absorbed by it, and not a single ripple or sound could be heard coming out of the void. However, looking down from the outside of the giant hand, everything was perfectly normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary at all. Whether it was divine sense, naked eyes, or some rare divine ability, none of them could see through what was happening in the void. Under the flag, Liu Bang and King Zhangqiu were sitting opposite each other on golden chairs carved with dragons. In front of them was a luxurious table about 10 feet long, on which all kinds of steaming, exquisite dishes were piled. These dishes were cooked on the spot by the expert chefs Liu Bang brought here, and all the ingredients were precious ingredients such as real dragon livers and phoenix gallbladders. A demon immortal, who had cultivated to the 18th tier heaven immortal realm in his true form of a tricolored deer, was howling and rolling on the mountainside. He had reverted to his true form, but the tendons of his limbs and his penis had been cut off, and more than 70% of his deer blood had been drained. he howled at the top of his lungs, but a demon-suppressing talisman produced by the Directorate of Celestials was stuck firmly on his forehead, rendering him incapable of doing anything other than screaming and rolling on the ground. Smilingly, Liu Bang scooped up a spoonful of steaming, delicious deer blood and hoof tendon soup from the pot in front of him. The tender, fresh and sweet deer blood slid down his throat like a piece of silk, while the extremely finely cut tendons in the blood were tender, elastic, fragrant and smooth. They seemed to explode in his mouth, bringing a thick fragrance and fresh taste that kept rolling up his throat. "Marvelous!" Liu Bang exclaimed. He glanced sideways at Deer Immortal, who was struggling and twisting on the mountainside, and casually waved his finger. Laughing heartily, Fan Kuai rushed over and stamped his foot on the deer's head, then pulled out a dagger and cut a piece of steaming deer meat from its chest. One of the guards brought him some strong wine. Fan Kuai ate the deer meat and drank the wine, and before long he had finished all the meat on the deer's chest. "This feels great." While laughing, Fan Kuai slapped his chest and stared fiercely at the mass of silver light that was fluctuating rapidly in the distance. With a smile on his face, King Zhangqiu picked up a piece of stir-fried deer penis with his chopsticks and put it into his mouth. Slowly chewing the steaming delicacy, he breathed a long sigh of contentment. Halfway up the mountain, a flood dragon, who had also cultivated to the realm of Heaven Immortal, was howling as a group of heavily armored elite soldiers pressed it against a boulder. A chef dressed in a cyan robe slowly walked up to the flood dragon. Holding a sharp butcher's knife, he slowly picked out the dragon tendons, liver, heart, and other precious ingredients from the flood dragon. Melodious music rang out from a nearby grove, and a group of female immortals in scantily clad came out of the grove, singing and dancing with long fans in their hands, performing a dance of heavenly fiends in front of King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang. The aroma of wine and meat wafted in the air, while beautiful women entertained them. King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang drank to their heart's content. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 different dishes with dragon meat as the main ingredient, Liu Bang finally put down the wine cup and turned to look at the dazzling mass of silver light in the distance. "This young man is indeed extraordinary. Bai Zhu and the others are all gold immortals, and their true forms are extremely strong divine beasts. Yet, he was able to trap them all with a formation. No wonder King Zhangqiu wants to kill him here." King Zhangqiu wiped a drop of wine from the corner of his mouth and said with a cold grin, "His Majesty favors him so much that he actually rewarded him with a supreme tower. Not only does he have the aptitude to cultivate both magic and fleshly body, but he is also Gao's man. If we don't take this opportunity to kill him, will we keep him alive to make things difficult for us in the future?" With a lazy smile on his face, Liu Bang called over a delicate and beautiful female immortal and pulled her into his arms. He gently rubbed the 2 lumps of warm jade on the immortal's chest with both hands and sighed leisurely. "Well, let him do whatever he wants. It will be great if he is killed by Bai Zhu and the others. But it will be great if he can kill Bai Zhu and the others. In short, we just don't let Bai Zhu and the others leave Yu Xiong Plain alive." He laughed grimly, narrowed his eyes, and said with a cold snort, "But, can we really do it by sacrificing a primordial immortal, a Buddha, and a few mediocre gold immortals and divine beasts? Not to mention that immortal Ding Jun has only joined the Buddhist League. Although he is no longer a primordial immortal, it will only take him a few years to become a Buddha. Do you really think such a trick can fool those people?" Caressing the immortal in his arms as if nothing had happened, Liu Bang said in a flat voice, "We just need to do it. As for what those almighty experts behind us think, it has nothing to do with us. Since they have made up the plan, they must have the confidence to succeed. Once it is done, Liu Bang, will certainly get some benefits, but don't tell me you won't get any benefits?" Squinting at King Zhangqiu, Liu Bang said in a deep and powerful voice, "Don't worry, Your Highness. Heaven and earth need a human emperor. But what we need is a human emperor who can cooperate with us. Sooner or later, the throne will be yours, Your Highness." King Zhangqiu narrowed his eyes and smiled. Leaning back in the chair, Liu Bang said lazily, "You just have to wait quietly, Your Highness. This is almost over." Even if Saint Empress Hua wholeheartedly protects the human race, even if she is made of iron, how many nails can she hit? This time, it is Yu who has angered the public. When those few patriarchs who are as famous as Saint Empress Hua come forward, she can only watch from beyond the heavens and can no longer interfere. Slapping hard on the plump butt of the fairy in his arms, Lu Bang said proudly, "You can go anywhere in the world if you're right, but this time, you're right." King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang looked at each other and burst into laughter. At the same time, they looked up at the black flagpole standing between them, then glanced at the huge black flag fluttering in the wind with feverish eyes. The sky-veiling flag of chaos was the primordial immortal weapon of the Arctic Emperor of the Celestial Court, a primordial artifact born in the chaos. If Lu Bang had not borrowed a treasure of this level to conceal all the auras within 3,000 miles, how could the garrison of Yuxiong Plain not have discovered the conflict between Wu Qi and Baizhu? But now, with this treasure, even the supreme oracles in Liangzhu could not detect what was happening here. Whether Wu Qi was killed by Baizhu and his companions, or Baizhu was killed by Wu Qi, it would be the most favorable outcome. Lao Tzu's tip-off to Baizhu and his companions was not in vain. Tiske, it just so happened that Tan Lang was stopped. Lu Bang shook his head and laughed. Cultivating both fleshly body and magic? Getting the human emperor's appreciation and bestowing the supreme tower? Bah, why don't we kill such a genius as soon as possible so that he won't cause us trouble in the future? King Zhangqiu nodded in agreement. He swallowed a piece of dragon liver, then raised his wine cup high and said, "To the King of Han." With a smile on his face, Lu Bang kissed the female immortal in his arms, then raised his cup and cried out, "To your excellency." Both men looked at each other and laughed, then drank the wine in their cups. King Zhangqiu's interest was aroused as well. He grabbed a beautiful female immortal standing next to him and impatiently pressed her down on the chair. Before long, the woman's moans drifted out from the top of the hill. The eyes of Lu Bang, Zhang Liang, Han Exin, Xiao He, and the others who stood beside him were filled with disdain at the same time. Narrowing his eyes, King Zhangqiu crazily sprinted toward the female immortal beneath him with a smile on his lips, and there was a cold sneer in his seemingly hazy eyes. Enveloped by the starlight spewing out of Dark Een Celestial Tower, Wu Qi grabbed Baizhu's head and smashed him with his fists like a storm, causing him to howl and howl miserably. Baizhu's wife, a tigress who was equally fierce and ferocious, was roaring furiously. She had transformed into her true form of a white tiger and kept pouncing on Wu Qi, trying to save her husband. But Ao Buzan and the Dragon Python sisters were holding her back, not allowing her to get close to Wu Qi. Ao Buzan had shrunk his body to about an inch long, and was running around the tigress with a cheeky smile on his face, teasing her with a glib tone. Your baby is dead, and now your husband is going to die. TSK, there's no hope for a widow with a dead son. Oh, you're a widow now. Why don't you just remarry? You're a white tiger, and Lao Tzu is a black dragon. The black and white dragon and tiger are a match made in heaven. Come, my dear, give me a kiss. Ao Buzan's filthy words made the tigress' hair stand on end with anger. She waved her claws and tried to tear Ao Buzan's body to pieces, but Ao Buzan was only an inch long, and her true form was too huge. So, how could she grab hold of Ao Buzan, who was several times more slippery than a loach? In particular, the Dragon Python sisters were constantly spurting out divine light of ice and fire to help her fight. Every beam of divine light of ice and fire forced the tigress to flee in a sorry state. There were also countless pearls condensed from starlight that rained down on her from all directions. Each pearl was as heavy as hundreds of mountains, and it made her feel unbearable pain all over her body. If she was not careful, she would be beaten until she rolled on the ground. In particular, these pearls condensed from starlight contained some wonderful power. Every time the tigress was hit, her eyes would be filled with illusions. Gradually, her mind began to blur, and she could no longer figure out where she was. The two white tigers were under Wu Qi's control, but the other divine beasts in the formation were roaring and roaring wildly as they kept attacking the base of the formation. Alone, Wu Qi was fighting against dozens of divine beasts, all of whom were above the gold immortal realm. Just maintaining the formation alone was already too much for him. Every impact directly shook Wu Qi's internal organs. Blood kept dripping from his 7 orifices, and his meridians were in severe pain as if they were being stirred by knives. Wu Qi looked up in surprise in the direction of Yuxiong Plain. Why hadn't anyone noticed what was happening here? All of a sudden, the silver light screen behind Wu Qi trembled and was shattered by a tremendous force. A flaming man came leaping over with a heavy blade in his hand, thrusting the blade towards Wu Qi's back. Chapter 746. Kill. It was obvious that the flaming man behind him had the bloodline of the fire phoenix. He was about 10 feet tall, and his face was blurred, but one could roughly see a sharp phoenix beak on his face. His body was almost completely transparent, like a red-hot glass, and a large sheet of clean, gentle flame was spraying out of his body. It was this seemingly harmless flame that, on the contrary, looked extraordinarily beautiful, but had burned through the star power barrier in Wu Qi's formation. The heavenly flame of Phoenix was the only superior-grade divine flame between heaven and earth that had evolved from acquired to innate. It had to be devoured by the imperial bloodline of the Phoenix clan with excellent aptitudes, then fuse with a wisp of innate fire spirit in the bloodline of the Phoenix, transforming all acquired flames into the invincible heavenly flame of Phoenix that could incinerate everything. It was also a flame that had a life of its own, and could create things. The blade in the flaming man's hand was produced out of thin air by the heavenly flame of Phoenix. It was not an illusory object, but a divine weapon forged from the divine iron of Phoenix condensed from the heavenly flame of Phoenix. This was the mystery of the heavenly flame of Phoenix. Ordinary phoenixes could only use the Nanming flame, which was one of the most powerful flames in the world. Only the imperial bloodline of the Phoenix clan could produce the heavenly flame of Phoenix. It was also one of the most mysterious flames in the world, and the Phoenix clan rarely showed it to the public. Wu Qi's heart sank. Among these divine beasts who claimed that their children had died in the myriad poisons formation, there was actually an imperial bloodline of the Phoenix clan? This was a big problem. It was Wu Qi who constructed the myriad poisons formation, and if he attracted the attention of the Phoenix clan, he would be in endless trouble. The Phoenix clan was the emperor of all the birds in the world. Even though divine birds such as Gale and Blue Luan sometimes did not obey the orders of the Phoenix clan, no one dared to underestimate the strength of the Phoenix clan. Although the current Phoenix clan was no longer as mighty and powerful as it was in the ancient times, and there were internal divisions in the Phoenix clan, such as the 5 great emperors on Pangu continent and the Diu dynasty, the identity of this flaming man was enough to give Wu Qi a headache. Even 1/6 of the overall strength of the Phoenix clan was not something that Wu Qi could withstand. Damn it! Why don't you take care of your son and let him run around? It's the father's fault for not teaching his son properly. Your son deserves to die. A stream of anger rushed straight to his head. From the dragon scales all over Wu Qi's body, a clump of black flame that was as tranquil as melted glass spurted out. The sky-burning divine flame roared out, burning a large hole in the void behind him. The fire phoenix screeched and slashed its blade into the void behind Wu Qi. He couldn't stop it in time and tumbled into the shattered void. Wu Qi clasped his palms together, and a murderous look flashed across his face. In the next moment, a large amount of lightning flame condensed from chaotic energy smashed into the shattered void along with a deep, muffled whistle. Behind him, countless translucent white spherical bulges appeared in the 30-feet-wide void. This was a phenomenon that could only be seen when the void barrier was shattered by his chaos divine thunder. Bai Zhu and his wife stared with their eyes wide open. "How dare you kill Lord Fengheng?" they roared in unison. Wu Qi stamped his foot on Bai Zhu's head and roared, "You can kill me, but don't tell me I can't kill you." With a casual wave of his hand, a beam of sky-burning divine flame transformed into a tiny blade shadow and cut through the void. Lord Fengheng howled and fell out of the void. His whole body was covered with twisted wounds. Obviously, the shattering of the void had caused him great harm. After all, although Lord Fengheng's bloodline was noble, his cultivation base was too low. A mere 12th-tier gold immortal was undoubtedly vulnerable to a single blow from Wu Qi. Grabbing Lord Fengheng's head with one hand, Wu Qi crushed it. A clump of black fiend flame rushed out of his palm, which quickly refined Lord Fengheng's body, burned his soul, and turned him into numerous golden blood crystals and purple soul crystals. Wu Qi took a deep breath and absorbed the phoenix bloodline extracted from Lord Fengheng's body, which was several miles long and as thick as a water tank. It was the bloodline of the Phoenix imperial family. With a gentle breath, he inhaled the heavenly fire of Phoenix, which was trembling slightly where Lord Fengheng had disappeared. This was the real heavenly fire of Phoenix. There was no need for Wu Qi to collect all kinds of acquired flames. Now, he already had the purest heavenly fire of Phoenix. In Baiju's horrified eyes, Wu Qi put his fingers together, and a sharp sword forged from the divine iron of Phoenix, which was transformed from the heavenly fire of Phoenix, was pressed against Baiju's forehead. "Release your soul and let me imprison you or you die, and I'll leave your wife to Ao Buzan." When Ao Buzan heard Wu Qi's words, saliva splashed out of the corner of his mouth. He cried out joyfully, "My lord has unified the universe, and his longevity is boundless. Kill that man, and after Lao Tzu has taught this woman a few days, I promise she will be obedient. She won't dare to go east, and she won't dare to kill a chicken. Wonderful, my beauty, here comes Lao Tzu. There was a time when Lao Tzu liked men like you." Baizhu and his wife roared angrily at the same time. Wu Qi pointed the sword at Baizhu. The high temperature of the heavenly fire of Phoenix burned Baiju's fur, and the sword sank between his eyebrows and pressed against his skull. "I don't know why your son appeared in the myriad poisons formation, and I'm not here for him." Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice. "To put it bluntly, if a son dies, he can have another one, but if you die, you will really have no descendants. Release your soul and let me imprison you or else." "Ao Buzan, can dragons and white tigers give birth to mixed bloods?" Ao Buzan laughed strangely and cried out, "Generally speaking, it's impossible for a man to have sex once in a while. But Lao Tzu can have sex once in a while. At worst, Lao Tzu can have sex every night for a whole cultivation period. Surely he can lay a few white tiger eggs, can't he? Tiske, my beauty, as the saying goes, love grows with time. Why don't you just give in to me, Lao Tzu? Your husband will soon be a dead tiger, and Lao Tzu can soak his penis in wine." White tiger eggs. The faces of Baizhu and his wife darkened. It was well known that white tigers were viviparous, and only dragons were oviparous divine beasts. If a white tiger laid eggs, wouldn't it be the kind of crystal that Ao Buzan mentioned? As for soaking a certain part of Baiju's body in wine, Baiju's body began to tremble, and he felt a chill between his hind legs. "You can always have another son when your son is gone," Wu Qi said grimly as he slowly thrust the sword into Baiju's skull. Baizhu roared angrily, "I surrender. Lao Tzu surrenders. You'd better think it through. Lao Tzu is White Emperor's man." Ao Buzan, who had been arrogant and energetic just a moment ago, immediately lost his strength. He flew back to Wu Qi's shoulder weakly, threw his head back, and heaved a long sigh. "You're so disappointing. Don't you know that a man would rather die than submit? Baizhu, you still have a chance. You still have a chance to be a hero. Come on, you'd rather die than submit. You'll just be killed by my master, and then I'll take your wife, right?" As he spoke, Ao Buzan's interest was aroused again. He stood on Wu Qi's shoulder with his two hind paws, waved his hands and roared passionately, "Come on, Baizhu. Don't bring shame to the ancestors of your White Tiger clan. Die like a hero. You'd rather die standing than live on your knees." Wu Qi cast a sidelong glance at Ao Buzan and snorted coldly. Baizhu and his wife looked at each other, their bodies trembling. Obviously, they were also struggling in their hearts. Wu Qi sneered and said coldly, "Oh, you'd rather die standing than live on your knees? Ao Buzan, you've taken Baiju's wife. Are you going to make her kneel or stand?" Ao Buzan's saliva flowed down from the corner of his mouth again. He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Of course, she's going to lie on her knees." Baizhu and his wife were so angry that they spat out a mouthful of blood. Bai Zhu gnashed his teeth and roared, "Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu, I surrender!" He knocked his head hard on the ground, and a beam of white light shot out from between his eyebrows. The soul of a white tiger was running wildly in the white light. Wu Qi snorted coldly, and a thin mark appeared between his eyebrows. A drop of his blood essence flew out and planted the most complicated and vicious restriction he knew in Bai Zhu's primordial spirit. Then, Wu Qi did the same to Bai Zhu's wife, Bai Er. The couple were forced to obey Wu Qi. They looked at each other for a while, then couldn't help but burst into tears. But Lord Feng Heng was brutally killed by Wu Qi right in front of them, and the tragic scene really frightened them. Coupled with Wu Qi's vicious and shameless threat, Bai Zhu and Bai Er did not have the courage to disobey Wu Qi's order. As the proud descendants of the White Tiger, they had no choice but to surrender. The formation began to tremble violently. The divine beasts were still attacking Wu Qi's formation with all their might. Another stream of blood gushed out of Wu Qi's 7 orifices. He gritted his teeth and shouted, then hurriedly took Bai Zhu and Bai Er to another fire phoenix in the formation, which was Lord Feng Heng's wife. With the help of Bai Zhu and Bai Er, Wu Qi effortlessly used Bai Zhu and Bai Er to launch a sneak attack from behind, while he himself killed the phoenix head-on. As for Ao Buzan's request to keep the fire phoenix to warm his bed, Wu Qi chose to ignore it. Ao Buzan looked bitterly at Wu Qi, but when Wu Qi threw her all the blood and soul crystals extracted from the fire phoenix, Ao Buzan immediately rose to her feet in high spirits and began to flatter Wu Qi. Bai Zhu and Bai Er launched a sneak attack, while Wu Qi launched a frontal attack. One by one, Wu Qi subdued the remaining 42 divine beasts in the formation. But he still planted a vicious restrictive spell in their nascent divinity, forcing these divine beasts, who all had the cultivation base of gold immortals, to submit to him. Together with the star golden rhino couple who were trapped in Dark Ean's celestial tower, Wu Qi now had 46 powerful divine beasts under his command, all of whom had the cultivation base of gold immortals or above. Looking at these powerful divine beasts complacently, Wu Qi put them all into Dark Ean's celestial tower. Then, with a wave of his hand, he dispelled the celestial formation. The formation formed by 60 flying ships under Huang Liang's command gradually revealed itself amidst the starlight. More than 1,000 miles away, Lu Bang, who was enjoying a feast on a mountaintop, jumped to his feet in shock. That kid killed Bai Zhu and the others? How did he do it? Could it be that he's already a supreme high priest? King Zhangqiu, who was lying on the bodies of a few female immortals, jumped to his feet as well. Chapter 747. When Huang Liang and the 10,000 soldiers that Wu Qi had brought out of the East Sea province saw the blue sky and white clouds again, all of them breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Wu Qi hovered in front of these flying ships. Dark Ean's celestial tower was emitting beams of starlight that wrapped around Wu Qi, making him look like a deity made of starlight, radiating a light so bright that no one dared to look directly at him. At this moment, Huang Liang and the others really thought that Wu Qi was the reincarnation of some ancient god. They could not believe that he alone had killed dozens of divine beasts blocking their way, and even the hundreds of powerful spirit beasts they had brought with them were gone. Marquis of Province! Huang Liang drew his sword, pointed it at the sky, and cried out. One after another, the 10,000 soldiers drew their weapons and let out a deafening roar. Everyone looked at Wu Qi solemnly. From this moment on, Wu Qi's place in their hearts would be unshakable. Wu Qi took a deep breath. His eyes shone with a strange gleam, and in the blink of an eye, he glanced at all the mountains and hills within a radius of 10,000 miles. Under the gaze of his eyes, nothing could hide. In just the blink of an eye, he had fixed his eyes on Lu Bang and the others, who were standing on a mountaintop 1,000 miles away and staring at him with their mouths agape. Wu Qi smiled, a very happy smile. No wonder these aggressive divine beasts could accurately block his way, and no wonder they could get such accurate information. With King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang by his side, Wu Qi was too lazy to think about anything else. King Zhangqiu, you have colluded with immortals and plotted against the Marquis of Diyu Province. You deserve to die. Come with me to Liangzhu now and confess your crimes. Wu Qi let out a deafening roar. A clump of 9 nether ghost flame towered into the sky from behind him, transforming into a giant hand that was a few miles in circumference. In a flash, it streaked across the sky and grabbed at Lu Bang and the others. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, he did not care about the strength of Lu Bang and the others at all. He was confident that he could easily capture them alive and interrogate them for some extremely confidential information. The fact that Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu were sitting opposite each other and having a feast was strange no matter how one looked at it, and the mystery behind it was very valuable. Wu Qi also saw the flagpole standing between Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu. He also saw the flag emitting a faint black smoke that blanketed an area 3,000 miles in circumference. Without a doubt, the delay of the garrison in Yuxiong Plain must have something to do with this flag. Beside Wu Qi, the dragon python sisters had also transformed into giant creatures that were a few miles long. Lightly flapping their translucent wings, they opened their mouths and shot out 2 beams of divine light, one gold and the other silver. The beams intertwined with each other and turned into 2 spiral-shaped beams of light that shot toward the mountaintop. At the same time, Wu Qi waved his hand and sent all the flying ships behind him into his chaotic interstitial world, except for the Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship with the strongest defense. He sent all the soldiers in the ships to the last one, the Jade Armor Dark Turtle flying ship, while the Dark Een Celestial Tower burst out a great sheet of starlight to envelop the flying ship as well. A few fiend shadows darted out from under Wu Qi's feet and plunged silently into the ground without alerting anyone, concealing all their auras and hiding in the depths of the earth. Even before the fight with Lu Bang and the others began, Wu Qi was fully prepared. He did not know the origin of the huge flagpole and the flag, but he had a bad feeling about it. For the sake of safety, he had to be prepared to deal with any changes. Huang Liang and the other captains and soldiers were part of Wu Qi's foundation, and he could not let them die in vain. Therefore, he had to protect them well. As for the few celestial fiend puppets, they would be able to send some messages to Princess Zhang should Wu Qi encounter some irresistible force and be trapped. Wu Qi was confident that even if he was really trapped by some formation used by Lu Bang and others, as long as Princess Zhang was in charge of the situation, she would not let the East Sea province fall into chaos, and would find a way to help him as much as possible. The giant hand formed from the 9 nether ghost flame was the first to arrive, but the divine light of ice and fire unleashed by the dragon python sisters was less than 10 miles away from the mountaintop. Lu Bang smiled contemptuously. He patted the thigh of the female immortal next to him, then pointed at the sky-veiling flag of chaos. Smiling, he said to King Zhangqiu, "Those livestock are killed, and Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province who is highly appreciated by the human emperor, is missing as well. Do you think there is a better result than this, Your Highness? Those livestock are the true descendants of the 3 old fogies in the east, north, and west." Smiling, King Zhangqiu spread the legs of a petite female immortal and placed them on his body. While enjoying the beautiful body of the female immortal, he burst out laughing and said, "It couldn't be better. The current human emperor is indecisive, but also headstrong. Now that the genius he admires the most has suddenly gone missing, he can't just swallow his anger. When the time comes, as long as we add fuel to the fire, he will have no choice but to fall into our trap." Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu were laughing complacently, but they did not know that not only could Wu Qi see every slightest movement of their lips from thousands of miles away, but Wu Qi was also proficient in lip reading. Wu Qi had captured every word of their conversation. Wu Qi could not help but wonder, what kind of plan do they have? How could they trap the Eastern Green Emperor, the Northern Black Emperor, and the Western White Emperor, 3 figures who had existed since the ancient times, and the current human emperor? What means does Lu Bang have to make me go missing? Just as Wu Qi was wondering, high up in the sky, beyond the green underworld, a huge star suddenly burst out with a dazzling light. Then, another star burst out with a dazzling light that lit up the whole sky, and then more and more stars burst out with blinding flames. A total of 7 stars hung high up in the sky, forming the pattern of a spoon that Wu Qi was very familiar with, stealing the light from all the other stars. But as soon as the light of these 7 stars shone, in the direction right in front of the handle of the spoon, a large star that was hundreds of times brighter than all 7 stars combined burst out with a bright light that blanketed the whole sky. A total of 8 beams of silver light came whistling down from the sky and were swallowed by the sky-veiling flag of chaos. The originally pitch-black flagpole and the flag were covered with a dazzling silver light at the same time, and the star patterns of the Big Dipper and the North Star quietly appeared on the flag. The divine light of ice and fire shot out by the dragon python sisters was gently swept up by the flag and disappeared. But just as the giant hand condensed from the 9 nether ghost flame flew over the mountaintop, the flag swayed slightly, and a silver torrent soared into the sky, rolling up the pitch-black hand and disappearing without a trace. Before Wu Qi could do anything else, Lu Bang gently flicked his finger. Immediately, a strong beam of light 10 miles in diameter shot out from the sky-veiling flag of chaos, falling beside Wu Qi and the others in an instant. A loud boom rang out as the void within a radius of several hundred miles around Wu Qi and the others collapsed. Wu Qi and everything around him were sucked into the collapsing void. Along with them were dozens of mountains of different sizes and vast tracts of land. Fortunately, after Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppets plunged into the ground, they quickly went far away along with the flow of natural energy in the underground energy veins. Otherwise, they would have been sucked into the void as well, and at that time, there would be no one to inform them. With the strike of the sky-veiling flag of chaos, Wu Qi and the others were sucked into the void. The silver light swirled around the shattered void for a while, and in the blink of an eye, it had completely mended the broken void. Lu Bang chuckled and waved his hand. The sky-veiling flag of chaos transformed into a small flag and fell into his hand. Then he sprinkled a sheet of silver light that swept up everything on the mountaintop, including the dismembered flood dragon and deer immortal, leaving not even a hair behind. Then, the company quickly disappeared amidst the silver light. Right after Lu Bang and the others disappeared, the 18 supreme towers soundlessly broke through the void and arrived above the mountaintop. A cold, emotionless voice rang out. "Which fellow immortal from the celestial court is here? Stay here. Is this a place where you can come and go as you please?" Accompanied by the gloomy voice, an invisible, bizarre force quietly rang out along with the shrill howl of ghosts. The mountain where Lu Bang and the others had been standing just now turned into ashes and dissipated silently. Then, the mountains and rivers within a radius of 1,000 miles, including several small villages, disintegrated as well. Except for those farmers who were at a loss, everything else, including their clothes, was annihilated by the bizarre force. The joint attack of the 18 supreme oracles shook Lu Bang and the others, who had been swept away by the sky-veiling flag of chaos, and blood sprayed out from all over their bodies at the same time. Some people with weaker cultivation bases, such as the few female immortals around Lu Bang, as well as the maids and cooks they brought with them, exploded and turned into blood that sprayed all over the sky. Fortunately, the sky-veiling flag of chaos was extremely mysterious. Although it was controlled by Lu Bang and could not exert any of its power, it still brought Lu Bang, King Zhangqiu, and the others into the void and fled without being discovered by these supreme oracles who had sensed something was amiss. In just 10 minutes, the news that Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province, had been attacked and his whereabouts were unknown quickly spread across Liangzhu. At this moment, Wu Qi was standing in the main control cabin of a jade armor dark turtle flying ship, his hands clasped tightly around a huge crystal that stood hundreds of feet tall in front of him, constantly injecting all his strength into it. The huge jade armor dark turtle flying ship was wrapped in a layer of light that looked like a turtle shell, and was flying through the dark, unknown turbulence of space like a straw. Inside the cabin, Huang Liang and the other 10,000 soldiers were unconscious. They were knocked out by the impact when the void was broken, and if it were not for the ship's protection, they would have been crushed into meat pies by the pressure brought by the swift and violent turbulence of space outside. The chaotic energy in Wu Qi's body was rapidly depleting, and just as his strength was about to be depleted, the huge flying ship trembled violently and plunged headlong through a thick, dark barrier that stretched for billions of miles, plunging into a strange world where hundreds of blood-red moons hung in the dark sky. Wave after wave of gloomy and evil aura kept coming from all directions. The flying ship dispersed the evil aura, stirred up large ripples, and crashed heavily into the middle of a huge mountain that stood tens of thousands of miles tall, sinking deep into the dark mountain. Wu Qi took a deep breath and gasped violently for a few moments. Damn it, where have I been taken? Chapter 748. The violent impact did not leave a scratch on the shell of the ship. The shell of this prehistoric beast did not disappoint. On the contrary, the decks and cabins constructed by the military court were twisted, and some of the energy transmission arrays were damaged. A large amount of energy was flowing out of these damaged arrays, while the turtle shell-shaped light screen on the ship's surface was gradually fading away. Wu Qi cursed under his breath, swaying and shaking his dizzy head. Then, he trod on the wrinkled and uneven deck and came before the energy core. Then he threw a punch at the thick alloy armor outside the energy core, sinking Wu Qi's fist deep into the hard armor, which was mainly composed of the raw materials used to forge Heaven Immortal artifacts. Accompanied by a shrill tearing noise, the 10 feet thick armor was torn apart by Wu Qi, revealing the twisted energy core, which was undergoing a violent reaction. 360 floating rune arrays were colliding with each other in the energy core, which was 3 miles in diameter. Normally, these rune arrays would hover in a fixed position inside the energy core instead of colliding with each other randomly like this. When the arrays collided with each other, a blinding light burst out. When the light, which contained the power of runes, fell onto a pile of immortal stones and spirit stones floating in the center of the energy core, it immediately stirred up a huge amount of energy that flowed like water. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. The damnable impact had destroyed the network of formations that were used to send out the energies, and prevented the energies from flowing out freely in the energy cores, causing them to accumulate in this place. If he had not come here immediately after the collision, it would not have taken long for this energy core, which was piled up like a small hill about a mile in diameter, to explode. Of course, the outer turtle shell would not be damaged by such an explosion, but Huang Liang and the others inside the cabin would be dead for sure. Cursing under his breath, Wu Qi waved his hand and stored the pile of immortal stones and energy stones, which were constantly releasing a tremendous power, into his interstitial world. He opened his mouth and took a deep breath, sucking in all the enormous energy that had been released. It was roughly equal to all the immortal energy in the body of 300 ordinary Heaven Immortals, but for Wu Qi, who was already a 5th-tier Gold Immortal, it was only enough to replenish a little of the energy he had just lost. Then, he exercised a mental cultivation technique and transformed the energy he absorbed into chaotic energy, then strode out of the control cabin. On the first floor near the bridge, Huang Liang and the other soldiers were lying on the ground. Wu Qi frowned and patted Ao Buzan on the head. Ao Buzan let out a weird laugh, opened his mouth, and spurted out a stinky black water wave. As the black water swept past, Huang Liang and the others screamed and jumped to their feet as they kept coughing out stinky black water. Wu Qi gave a soft cry, and the soldiers stopped what they were doing. Although all the immortal stones and energy stones in the energy cores had been taken away by Wu Qi, and the cabin had become dark and gloomy, with the help of the pearls mounted on the sabers carried by Huang Liang and the other officers, the cabin was illuminated with a faint light, and the people could still see everything around them. Huang Liang cleared his throat, then carefully came up to Wu Qi and asked respectfully, "What happened, Marquis?" Wu Qi shook his head and said with a frown, "We were ambushed just now. Someone used a magical treasure to tear open the void and throw us into this damned place. I was afraid that you couldn't protect the flying ship, so I rushed into the ship and took control of it. I don't know where it is now." Stamping his foot, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about it. Everyone get out of here. This flying ship is damaged, and it can't be used without major repairs. Get out and change flying ships, then find out where we are and find a way to leave this place." Huang Liang wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Instead, he gave a loud shout and ordered the soldiers to line up and leave the cabin. Wu Qi was the last to go out. He put away the damaged flying ship. Leading the army, he walked along a 100-mile-long tunnel that the flying ship had created on the mountain. After walking for a while, a strong gust of wind suddenly blew in front of them. Under the blood-red moonlight, a wild continent appeared in front of them. They were standing at the entrance of a huge cave, which was naturally the result of the flying ship's collision just now. Looking up, they saw a black mountain towering into the clouds, and looking down, they saw an abyss that was tens of thousands of miles deep. All the soldiers present, including Huang Liang and the other captains, could only see hundreds of blood-red moons of different sizes in the sky, and the dark mist and dark clouds in the surroundings. Apart from that, they could not see anything else. But in Wu Qi's eyes, he could see a lot more. With a casual glance, he could see a grain of sand hundreds of thousands of miles away. Even though the sky was filled with hazy dark mist and thick dark clouds, it could not obstruct his vision. The mountain they were on was smooth and smooth, like a glaze that had been smeared with oil. It was a very strange stone, as if it had been washed by some invisible energy. It was so smooth that it could be used as a mirror. Wu Qi sent his divine sense into the mountain. These black stones were a great obstacle to divine sense. Even with Wu Qi's overall strength, his divine sense could only penetrate less than 1 mile into the mountain. The mountain was part of a huge mountain range. Wu Qi spread his divine will in all directions, and he found that behind them was a huge mountain range that stretched for an unknown number of miles. At least, with the current strength of Wu Qi's divine sense, he could not completely cover this mountain range. In front of the crowd, as far as Wu Qi could see, was a black desert. Dark hills, dark deserts, and dark deserts. Occasionally, a few dark yellow rivers would flow quietly through them. Along the banks of these rivers, the carcasses of countless monsters who had died tragically could be seen lying in disorder. These monsters came in all shapes and sizes. Not only on Pangu continent, there was no record of them even in the universal strange objects found in Scroll of Stealing. Not far away from the foot of the mountain, a few monsters that looked like ferocious wolves but had huge bodies, about 300 feet long and covered with sharp bone spikes, were attacking a huge monster that measured about 4,000 feet long, looked like a giant caterpillar, and was also covered with a thick black shell. The monster was wriggling its body and moving forward at a high speed. The monsters kept running around it, reaching out their claws and tearing at its body from time to time. Occasionally, when one of the claws ripped open the monster's shell, a large amount of black blood would spray out. The blood was extremely corrosive. Wu Qi saw a few huge rocks that were hit by the blood emit thick white smoke, and in the blink of an eye, they were corroded into puddles of liquid. The giant beast was in pain. A row of strange patterns that looked like human eyes grew on the middle of its body. Every time its carapace was torn open, a few of the patterns would spew out a large amount of poisonous gas, spreading in all directions. The few monsters seemed to know how dangerous the poisonous smoke was. Every time it sprayed out, they would nimbly dodge to the side, avoiding a head-on confrontation with the monster. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head as he glanced at these huge creatures with his divine will. Although their bodies were huge, their cultivation bases were very low, not even reaching the realm of Jindan. They were just some ordinary wild beasts, not even demon beasts. However, their physical strength was not weak, probably comparable to a nascent soul cultivator who specialized in body tempering. Just a casual attack from the few monsters that looked like ferocious wolves could carry a force of several 100,000 kilograms. What a damned place! Wu Qi cursed under his breath. There was not the slightest natural energy in the air here, only a gloomy and evil air that seemed to carry a strange life force, but it was very different from the life forces that Wu Qi was familiar with. Chapter 749. Under Wu Qi's gaze, the few heavenly ghosts rushed to the giant beast they had hunted like a gust of wind. Their sharp claws, teeth, and tails left countless huge wounds on the beast's body. In just a few breaths of time, the giant beast, which was several miles long, had been devoured by the few heavenly ghosts, and a great deal of blood gushed out of its mouth. Before long, 2 heavenly ghosts crawled out of the beast's mouth. Obviously, They had destroyed the beast's internal organs and killed its vitality. Even Wu Qi, who had a gloomy face, could not help but nod in admiration. These heavenly ghosts were much stronger than the one that had appeared in Ji City many years ago, and the gap in their strength was like the gap between a baby and an adult tiger. In terms of speed, strength, and ferocity, the few heavenly ghosts in front of him were far superior to the one Wu Qi had seen in the past. Even the giant beast they hunted had the overall strength of a heaven immortal, but they were easily killed by them. A few heavenly ghosts squeezed out of the giant beast's body happily, threw their heads back and roared joyfully, then gave a surprised look at the jade armor dark turtle flying ship, which was hovering in the sky dozens of miles away. Then, they waved their claws disapprovingly and leaped happily onto the giant beast's body. After devouring the beast's flesh and blood, the few heavenly ghosts cooperated with each other and dragged the nearly 3 miles long giant beast into the distance. At Wu Qi's order, the flying ship quietly followed behind the few heavenly ghosts. He even used his divine sense to gather a large patch of dark clouds in the distance and had them hover around the ship. Then he laid down all kinds of restrictive spells to prevent divine sense from peeping into the ship. For a moment, the huge dark clouds drifted behind the few heavenly ghosts, but they knew nothing about it as they dragged the giant beast upstream along a great river. The giant beast's heavy body left visible marks on the ground, and its blood flowed into the river in gurgling streams. The pungent smell of blood caused the creatures in the river to riot, and from time to time, large fish and aquatic beasts with heavy bony armor could be seen leaping out of the river. These big fish and aquatic beasts had ferocious faces and terrifying strength. Although they couldn't walk out of the water, they still leaped out of the water and madly roared at the few heavenly ghosts who were walking quickly on the shore. The few hundreds of meters long fishes widely opened their mouths. Their sharp teeth reflected the blood-red moonlight, shining brightly. They closed their mouths, and their teeth clashed against each other, causing a silvery cracking noise. A few large fishes even spat out light yellow streams of water from their bellies with all their might, darting for miles like sharp arrows and leaving huge holes on the dead beast's body. The few heavenly ghosts did not take these big fish and aquatic beasts seriously. They chattered and laughed, stopping from time to stand on the shore and twist their hips to provoke the creatures in the river. Wu Qi could not help but be surprised. According to the legends of immortal cultivators, these heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm were ferocious by nature and had no intelligence. They acted entirely on instinct. But looking at the free and unrestrained appearance of these heavenly ghosts, they were no different from human naughty teenagers. Although they looked a little ferocious, they did things in an orderly manner and did not give off the feeling that they had lost their spiritual wisdom and were muddle-headed. Everyone in the world is like this. Wu Qi shook his head inwardly. It was very likely that the ghost realm had caused great casualties to immortal cultivators in the past, so all the immortal cultivators were deliberately discrediting the existence of the ghost realm. Perhaps the heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm were indeed ferocious monsters who only knew how to kill, but perhaps there were also individuals with extremely high intelligence among them? At least, judging from the performance of these few heavenly ghosts, Wu Qi hoped that the heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm were not the legendary monsters. He hoped that he could meet some intelligent and cultured heavenly ghosts, and perhaps they would be the hope for Wu Qi to leave this place with his subordinates. He wondered if the East Sea City had received the news that he was missing. Princess Zhongli must keep the situation under control, and she must not rashly avenge me. King Zhangqiu was the prince of Diyu, and he was supported by King Baishan. As for Liu Bang, that old rascal and old lecher, since they had colluded with each other to plot against Wu Qi, how could they let go of the East Sea province that was under Wu Qi's name? Perhaps they would find an excuse to go to the East Sea province and stir up trouble. If Liu Bang saw Princess Zhonglu and had that kind of idea, with a sinister laugh, Wu Qi gritted his teeth and said, "If you dare to touch even a hair of Lao Tzu's people, Lao Tzu will wipe out your whole family." The sudden surge of thoughts made Wu Qi's killing intent surge. Huang Liang and the others were startled by Wu Qi's sudden burst of cold air. They stood where they were and dared not to move, controlling the flying ship to fly forward with a straight face. No one dared to make a sound, lest they offend Wu Qi, who had suddenly lost his temper and taught him a lesson for no reason. Clenching his fists so tightly that they made cracking noises, Wu Qi strode up to the transparent crystal wall in front of the bridge. He lightly tapped the crystal wall with his fingertips. Immediately, numerous runes, dozens of triangles, squares, and other three-dimensional patterns emerged on the surface of the light blue crystal wall, which was about 10 feet thick like a puddle of clear water. A wisp of Wu Qi's divine sense was sent into the crystal wall. After being magnified and purified by the restrictive formation, it transformed into an invisible wave that swept across tens of thousands of miles in a flash, recording the topographic map of the area into a huge soul crystal inside the flying ship. This was the special feature of the flying ships of Dayu's military court. They could quickly scan and record the topography of unfamiliar areas. As long as dozens of flying ships were sent out, they could record the topography of a large area in a very short period of time for the army to march and fight. Now that Wu Qi and his subordinates had been dragged into the ghost realm, he had to make all kinds of preparations. He could not take care of the affairs in the East Sea province for the time being. The most important thing now was to bring Huang Liang and his subordinates back to Pangu continent safely. Huang Liang, pass down my orders to all the brothers. The place we are in now is the legendary Ghost Realm, a place where only death awaits. Let all the brothers remember that the man who dragged us into this realm is King Zhangqiu, the son of King Baishan of Dayu. He has colluded with the immortals of the Celestial Court, and has committed many shady deeds that have harmed Dayu. This time, they have schemed against us, intending to kill us. All the men of East Sea will never let them go. As long as we can get out of the Ghost Realm, we will make him bleed for 5 steps, and he will give us an explanation. Wu Qi's voice was cold and murderous. It sounded like 2 pieces of metal colliding with each other, bringing with it a terrible aura of fighting on a battlefield. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Huang Liang and the others could not help but have their hair stand on end. At the same time, a great rage rose from the bottom of their hearts. Who is King Zhangqiu? The Prince of Dayu. The Prince of Dayu had colluded with the immortals of the Celestial Court to plot against the Marquis of Dayu, and sent 10,000 soldiers who had made great contributions in the crusade against Myriad Immortal Alliance into the Ghost Realm. There was no need to say anything more. Huang Liang and the others strode out of the bridge and told the 10,000 soldiers what Wu Qi had said. Before long, deafening roars began to reverberate and collide violently in the jade armor Dark Turtle flying ship. All the soldiers were roaring, 5 steps of blood, an eye for an eye. Wu Qi snorted coldly. Now that he was out of the Ghost Realm, there were some things that he had to do quickly and decisively. Otherwise, would the people in the world still think he was a pushover? They had come to him again and again. Could it be that he, Wu Qi, was not allowed to wield his blade and kill people? After obtaining the cultivation base of a 5th-tier gold immortal and subduing a group of gold immortals such as Bai Zhu and Bai Er, Wu Qi was emboldened, and his desire to compromise and struggle for survival gradually faded away. The flying ship flew slowly forward. Several heavenly ghosts happily dragged the huge monster forward. After running for more than 10 hours, they finally came to a valley surrounded by several mountains in the upper reaches of the river. Standing on the bridge and looking into the distance, Wu Qi could not help but be overjoyed. There were crude buildings made of boulders in the valley. Although they looked crooked like a dog's kennel, they were indeed buildings. Since these heavenly ghosts could build buildings, it was obvious that they had a certain level of intelligence. And Wu Qi also saw a large pit on one side of the valley, in which many pale black bones were piled up. These heavenly ghosts had learned to store the bones of their prey together, so the valley was clean and there were no messy bones scattered around. This awareness of environmental sanitation was also a sign of their intelligence. Wrapped in thick dark clouds, the flying ship slowly flew over the valley and hovered a few miles above the ground. The sky above the valley was already filled with dark clouds and black smoke, but even with the addition of the dark clouds brought by Wu Qi, it did not look strange at all. When the few heavenly ghosts were still a few miles away from the narrow passage at the entrance of the valley, they let out a shrill howl. Immediately, dozens of small and seemingly youthful heavenly ghosts rushed out of the valley, chirping and leaping toward the few heavenly ghosts. With the efforts of dozens of heavenly ghosts, the huge monster was soon transported into the valley. From the crooked and dilapidated buildings, a group of trembling heavenly ghosts with missing arms, legs, and tails walked out. They grunted with joy and slowly walked to the square in the middle of the valley to help cut the monster into pieces. When Wu Qi's divine sense swept across the valley, which was about 100 miles long and wide, he could not help but widen his eyes in surprise. Apart from the few heavenly ghosts who were out hunting and could be considered young men, there were only dozens of small heavenly ghosts in the valley, who could be considered teenagers and children. As for those heavenly ghosts with missing arms and legs, there were about 100 of them, but they were absolutely not young men. This was not the population ratio that a normal race should have. A few strong young men, dozens of children, and a large group of old men? Wu Qi furrowed his brows. What was going on? Just as Wu Qi was frowning and thinking, a shrill and unpleasant ghost howl suddenly came from afar. Wu Qi hurriedly swept his divine sense in that direction and saw that about 100 miles away, about 300 strong heavenly ghosts covered in green blood were being chased by more than 1,000 fierce and ferocious heavenly ghosts all the way to the valley. When the heavenly ghosts in the valley heard the howl, all of them rushed to the end of the narrow passage at the entrance of the valley and assumed a defensive posture. From time to time, they let out shrill howls, echoing the sounds of the heavenly ghosts in the distance. It took only a few breaths of time for these heavenly ghosts to cover a distance of over 100 miles. Before long, the 300 or so heavenly ghosts had rushed into the valley. As soon as they entered, they turned around and joined the other heavenly ghosts in defending the narrow passage to the death. As they approached the valley, the 1,000-odd heavenly ghosts slowed down. Grinning grimly, they pressed toward the valley step by step. Chapter 750. After instructing Huang Liang and the others to wait in the flying boat, Wu Qi flashed out of the boat. Casually, he pulled out a dark cloud and coiled it around his body, then began to descend slowly. Slowly, he came to a height of less than 1 mile from the ground, nearly touching the mountains on both sides of the valley's exit. As soon as he approached the top of the mountain, Wu Qi's body swayed and he was nearly sucked into the top of the mountain. Although the pitch-black mountains surrounding the valley were not very tall, they came with a strange suction force, and even with Wu Qi's overall strength, he nearly made a fool out of himself. He roughly estimated the strength of the suction force and concluded that these heavenly ghosts in front of him could not pass through the mountains safely. If they dared to enter or leave the valley from the top of the mountain, they would be firmly sucked to the top of the mountain and unable to move. Worse still, their bodies might not be able to withstand the great suction force, and their internal organs would be crushed to a pulp. Only then did Wu Qi understand why the heavenly ghosts in the valley were only guarding the narrow passage, which was less than 100 feet wide, and why the heavenly ghosts outside the mountain were only baring their fangs and brandishing their claws at the other end of the passage. None of them dared to take a detour into the valley and attack the enemy from the back. Wu Qi carefully studied the two groups of heavenly ghosts inside and outside the valley. The body lines of the group in the valley were softer, and the bone spurs on their backs were more exquisite and sharp, like polished jade. These heavenly ghosts in the valley gave off a strange sense of beauty. Their eyes were more lively, and there were sparks of wisdom flashing in them. They were stationed on one side of the narrow passage, and Chi-Chi could see the embryonic form of a military formation. However, the group of more than 1,000 heavenly ghosts outside the valley had bodies that looked like lumps of stone that had just been mined from the mountains. Their bodies were in a mess, and their muscles and bones were twisted together in a strange way. The bone spurs on their bodies were rough, and some of them seemed to have just been broken and had not yet regrown. The eyes of these heavenly ghosts were cloudy and filled with the brutal and ferocious aura of wild beasts. Their mouths were constantly dripping water, and from time to time, they let out deep and meaningless roars. These heavenly ghosts were running back and forth outside the narrow passage, trying to rush into the valley, but they seemed to be afraid of something. Their messy formation made them look like a group of wild beasts, and they could not be compared to the heavenly ghosts in the valley. After a moment of hesitation, over 100 heavenly ghosts threw their heads back and let out long roars, then rushed into the narrow passage that was tens of miles long like a gust of wind. They ran as fast as they could, and some of them even ran on the mountain walls that were perpendicular to the ground. They spat saliva and let out muffled roars, their eyes glinting with blood-red light as they pounced on the heavenly ghosts in the valley. The widest part of the narrow passage was only about 200 feet, and these heavenly ghosts were so huge that even at the widest part, they could only line up 4 or 5 heavenly ghosts shoulder to shoulder. It was even more difficult for these heavenly ghosts to maintain their formation when they were running at high speed. By the time they reached the middle of the passage, the invading heavenly ghosts could only run forward one after another, no longer having the momentum of a group charge. The heavenly ghosts in the valley let out deep roars, and when the first enemy rushed out of the passage, more than a dozen heavenly ghosts pounced on him at the same time. Tacitly, they launched a fierce attack on the enemy who had rushed out of the passage, slashing at the enemy with dozens of sharp claws and powerful long tails. A miserable howl rang out as the first heavenly ghost to rush out of the passage was torn to pieces on the spot. The other heavenly ghosts rolled on the ground in unison, while the trembling old heavenly ghosts behind them puffed out their chests at the same time and opened their mouths to spit out large sheets of green flame. These were the natal ghost flames of the heavenly ghosts who had once put Wu Qi and others in a sorry state in Ji City. They were extremely filthy and destructive. Accompanied by shrill ghost howls, dozens of 100-feet-thick ghost flames filled almost the entire passage, enveloping more than 100 heavenly ghosts in the passage at the same time. Their fleshly bodies had begun to wither, but the natal flames accumulated in them were several times stronger than those of the young and strong heavenly ghosts. The heavenly ghosts in the narrow passage were struggling and twitching in the monstrous flames. Although the ghostly flames were spurted out from the bodies of the heavenly ghosts, their natal ghostly flames were extremely lethal even to themselves. More than 100 heavenly ghosts were blocked by the flames in the narrow passage and burned crazily. There was really no way out for them. Before long, all the heavenly ghosts in the narrow passage were burned to a pulp. Apart from the dozens of heavenly ghosts at the back who fled with their bodies covered in flames, the other 30 or so heavenly ghosts at the front had been reduced to a puddle of pus. The ghostly fire ignited the pus that the heavenly ghosts had turned into, and just like adding a ladle of oil to a spark, the flames in the narrow passage grew stronger and stronger. But such a fierce ghost flame could not burn the mountain walls on either side. Wu Qi was shocked. It seemed that the mountain wall was not an ordinary thing. Not only did it have such a strange and powerful gravitational force, but it was also impervious to the attack of the ghost flames. The heavenly ghosts outside the valley roared into the sky in exasperation for a while. Then, they leaped forward to put out the ghost flames on their companions who were burned and lucky enough to escape, then stood at the mouth of the passage, shouting and provoking desperately. However, the heavenly ghosts in the valley did not budge at all and just guarded the narrow valley path. Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then sent a voice transmission to Huang Liang inside the flying ship. Inside the jade armored dark turtle flying ship, Huang Liang roared and issued an order to the soldiers inside. Tens of thousands of small windows on both sides of the ship opened one by one, and the soldiers stood behind the windows with crossbows in their hands, looking down at the thousands of heavenly ghosts who were roaring wildly a few miles down below. These soldiers were using Dayu's standard, bone-piercing crossbows, which were specially designed for large-scale killing. Each crossbow could shoot 36 bolts at once, which were specially made from the bones of a demon beast, Akabane Dahong. They flew extremely fast, more than 10 times faster than the sword beams of ordinary heaven immortals. Because of their incredible speed and the meticulously polished bolts inscribed with a large number of piercing runes, the bone-piercing crossbow, as its name suggested, had a very strong penetrating power. Even an ordinary heaven immortal with an immortal artifact would not be able to withstand the volley of bolts, let alone these heavenly ghosts. At Huang Liang's order, 10,000 bone-piercing crossbows fired at once. 360,000 specially made bone bolts, which were polished to the size of 10 hairs and no more than 1 foot and 2 inches long, shot out silently, covering the distance of a few miles in just 1,000th of a second. The bolts covered an area of several miles down below, leaving no blind spots. All of a sudden, the thousands of heavenly ghosts stopped moving. Their bodies stiffened, and countless tiny arrows of blood shot out of their bodies, rising more than 1,000 feet into the air. It was as if a dense forest of hemp had suddenly sprouted where they stood. Gradually, the bodies of these heavenly ghosts began to sway, and slowly, they fell to the ground reluctantly. As their huge bodies fell, they smashed into the ground, causing countless grains of sand and dust to spray up into the air along with the gust of wind. With a flick of his sleeve, Wu Qi collected the 360,000 bolts shot by Huang Liang and the others. It was the first time he had seen 10,000 bone-piercing crossbows fired at once. Their lightning-fast speed and amazing penetrating power made Wu Qi's scalp go numb. Yet, these bone bolts, which were no more than 1 foot and 2 inches long, had easily penetrated the ground of the ghost realm, which was dozens of times harder than steel, for more than 3 miles. What an amazing destructive power! And the soldiers who controlled the bone-piercing crossbows had not yet injected their own energies into the bolts. If a warrior whose cultivation base had reached the first Panga heaven or above had injected his Pangu sacred energy into the bolts and fully activated the penetrating spell inscribed on the bolts, the penetrating power of the bolts would be increased by more than 100 times. It was no wonder that Deyu could besiege heaven immortals with ordinary soldiers. Sure enough, he had his reasons. After instructing Huang Liang and the others to stay alert in the sky and not show their faces, Wu Qi patted Ao Buzan on the head. Ao Buzan understood and let out a deafening dragon roar. Then, he transformed into a black dragon that was 1,000 feet long and as thick as a water tank. Dense watery clouds and black smoke rolled and tumbled under his feet, while his eyes shone with a golden gleam. 2 dragon whiskers, each hundreds of feet long, tore through the air and produced a shrill whistle. What a vigorous and ferocious divine dragon! Sitting on Ao Buzan's back, Wu Qi slowly pushed away the clouds and descended into the valley. He exercised the dragon kill and grew to about 100 feet tall. 2 dragon horns grew out of his forehead, and his skin was covered with pitch-black dragon scales. He wore only a blood-red cloak wrapped around his waist as a battle skirt. Surrounded by a raging dark flame, he descended in front of the heavenly ghosts, riding on Ao Buzan. The hundreds of heavenly ghosts in the valley watched in horror as Wu Qi and Ao Buzan descended. A huge and ferocious dragon, a strange yet ferocious and evil dragon man, and the dragon python sisters, who had transformed into 20 feet long dragon pythons and coiled around Wu Qi's neck, looked no different from some ancient evil gods in the legends. Riding a black dragon, raising strange snakes, and covered in scales. What else could they be if not evil gods? Wu Qi flicked his sleeve and pointed to the exit. The few heavenly ghosts looked at each other, then carefully followed Wu Qi into the narrow passage and looked out of the valley. More than 1,000 heavenly ghosts were lying miserably on the ground, and their blood had formed a small lake on the ground. The few heavenly ghosts were so frightened that they screamed and ran back, scrambling to an old heavenly ghost who had a broken tail, an arm and a leg, and stammered a few words. The old heavenly ghost was taken aback, then he raised his only arm, threw his head back and roared, and knelt down before Wu Qi with hundreds of other heavenly ghosts. Speaking fluent human language, the old heavenly ghost kowtowed to Wu Qi and said, "Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. May I ask what business you have with me, and is there anything we can do to serve you?" Wu Qi shuddered at the old heavenly ghost's fluent language, and his heart skipped a beat. How could this old fellow speak such a fluent human language? He even had a hint of Pangu continent's native accent. Wu Qi cursed in his mind, "Damn it." Then, with a deep voice, he asked, "Are those people outside the valley your enemies?" As soon as Wu Qi asked the question, the heavenly ghosts kneeling on the ground burst into tears at the same time. Chapter 751. Hundreds of heavenly ghosts, who were more than 100 feet tall and 300 feet long, and covered in bone spikes, were kneeling on the ground and wailing like kindergartners being bullied by their classmates. Wu Qi stared blankly at the group of extremely emotional heavenly ghosts and shook his head blankly. Who said heavenly ghosts were a bunch of brainless creatures? Who said they knew nothing but killing and devouring? Who said they knew nothing but killing and devouring? Whoever made up these words should have their tongues cut out. Wu Qi took a deep breath and jumped off Ao Buzan's back as he looked at the heavenly ghosts in front of him, who were crying with rich expressions, the deep pain in their scarlet eyes, and felt the sorrow emanating from the bottom of their hearts. He helped the old heavenly ghost, who could speak fluent human language, to his feet and asked in a deep voice, "What injustice have you suffered? Tell me quickly and I'll help you." Wu Qi did not think that these heavenly ghosts were the terrible ones in the legends, the kind of ferocious creatures who coveted the flesh and blood of humans and cultivators and knew nothing but killing. These heavenly ghosts in front of him were not only sentient, but also possessed intelligence. They were affectionate, sentimental, and had their own social structure and division of labor. What was the difference between them and human beings? The heavenly ghosts outside the valley, on the other hand, were exactly the kind of heavenly ghosts in the legends. Wu Qi did not feel any pressure to kill them. They were just a bunch of greedy and bloodthirsty beasts. The old heavenly ghost raised his head and began to tell Wu Qi the story of his clan while crying. In the ghost realm, during the apocalypse of heaven and earth, many almighty experts had broken a piece of Pangu continent. This piece of land, measuring trillions of miles in circumference, had flown into the depths of the starry sky and merged with the first wisp of innate ghost energy since the creation of heaven and earth, thus forming the ghost realm, a unique domain that struck terror into the hearts of the outside world. There were countless corpses of almighty experts on this piece of land. Nourished by the innate ghost energy, these corpses gradually evolved into the first batch of heavenly ghosts in the ghost realm. Because of the ghost energy's greedy nature of devouring, these heavenly ghosts were ferocious and bloodthirsty, and loved to plunder blood and food. Their instinct was to kill and devour. But, after countless eons of evolution, generations of heavenly ghosts were born in the ghost realm, and among them, many brilliant geniuses emerged. These geniuses comprehended the supreme Tao of heaven and earth, from which they comprehended the cultivation path of the heavenly ghosts. From relying on instinct to devour everything to strengthen their own cultivation base, they gradually evolved to relying on self-cultivation to improve their cultivation base. With the growth of their cultivation base, the intelligence of the heavenly ghosts also became higher and higher. Those heavenly ghosts with stronger cultivation bases could gradually eliminate the trace of ferocious aura brought about by their innate nature. These powerful ghost cultivators possessed extremely high intelligence and great power. They established their own territories in the 9 Nether Ghost realm and gradually evolved into the famous 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 800 ghost saints of the 9 Nether Ghost realm. The 13 great heavenly ghost kings were experienced primordial immortals, while the 800 ghost sages were all peak-level gold immortals. It was even rumored that some of them had long since broken through the bottleneck of primordial immortals and attained primordial golden bodies. Relying on the unique geographical environment of the ghost realm, these 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 800 ghost sages dominated a region. Even those lofty figures of the celestial court who tried to control everything in their hands could do nothing to these powerful existences. Once, a primordial immortal from the celestial court invaded the ghost realm and tried in vain to make the 13 great heavenly ghost kings obey the edict of the celestial court. But the primordial immortal and the subsequent waves of reinforcements were all defeated by the 13 great heavenly ghost kings. If it had not been for the interference of unknown existences, the celestial court would have lost at least a few celestial emperors in that battle. The direct ancestor of the branch of heavenly ghosts in front of Wu Qi was also a genius. Born in a small clan in the ghost realm, he had attained the strength close to the peak-level gold immortal through hard cultivation, and had established his own foundation in the ghost realm, gradually gaining a powerful force. But whether it was the human world or the ghost realm, all kinds of melodramatic plots were happening all the time and everywhere that Wu Qi found extremely melodramatic. Because of his handsome and charming appearance, this newly born expert in the ghost realm caught the eye of a female ghost sage from the neighboring territory who sent him a powerful invitation to perform dual cultivation with him. Now that a ghost sage who had awed the ghost realm for countless years had taken a fancy to him, according to common sense, this ancestor should have happily washed himself and sent himself to the ghost sage's bed. But something happened that made Wu Qi want to vomit blood. This ancestor was the only infatuated person in the entire ghost realm since the creation of the world. Infatuated people naturally had to do things that were infatuated with love. This ancestor had just given birth to a litter of young children with his lover, so how could he care less about the ghost sage's invitation? Instead, he was enraged for his beauty and led his army to attack the ghost saint's territory. The female ghost sage felt that her face had been mercilessly trampled on, so she was also furious. She called a few ghost sages who were on good terms with her to join forces and wipe out the ancestor's army. They beat the ancestor into ashes and divided up his territory. Only the great ancestor's lover escaped with their family of 80 young children. They did not dare to stay in the territory of the ghostly sages. Instead, they fled to the most desolate countryside in the world of ghosts and souls to settle down. This branch of heavenly ghosts had secretly settled down here. As the saying goes, cut their way through brambles and thorns, struggled hard against countless fierce monsters, and paid a lot of sweat and blood. After several generations of development, they finally had a population of more than 3,000. Wu Qi could not help but be shocked when he heard this. A litter of 80 young children? It was said that heavenly ghosts had an amazing reproductive ability, but how could they give birth to 80 children in one litter? It suddenly dawned on Wu Qi why the legendary almighty experts strictly forbade heavenly ghosts from developing their territories outside the ghost realm. If dozens of heavenly ghosts were allowed to sneak into outer heavenly realms, it would not take many years for the entire outer heavenly realms to be filled with heavenly ghosts, according to the way they multiplied. Then, to Wu Qi's surprise, after several generations of reproduction, these heavenly ghosts had only produced a population of about 3,000. It was obvious that it was not easy to survive in this wilderness. However, only a few hundred people were left out of the original 3,000. Could it be related to the heavenly ghosts outside? Sobbing, the old heavenly ghost continued to tell Wu Qi about the history of the development of his clan. As Wu Qi expected, when this clan of heavenly ghosts was flourishing, a large clan of heavenly ghosts with a population of 10,000 suddenly moved to a place less than 300 miles away from them. On top of that, they were the primitive heavenly ghosts, the most troublesome species in the realm. In terms that Wu Qi was familiar with, these so-called primitive heavenly ghosts were uncivilized savages, cannibals, and the like. These heavenly ghosts were just born naturally in the ghost realm. They were either born from the corpses of dead heavenly ghosts, or from the bodies of all kinds of dead creatures. They were born ferocious and barbaric, and never listened to any reason. Primitive heavenly ghosts had no intelligence. Once, a powerful heavenly ghost cultivator had slaughtered hundreds of millions of primitive heavenly ghosts and dissected their bodies, only to find that all of them had brains the size of walnuts, and it was impossible for them to have any intelligence. Only after generations of evolution could they produce a few intelligent geniuses, and only then would these primitive heavenly ghosts embark on the path of pursuing the heavenly Tao and constantly strengthening themselves. It was unknown what kind of powerful monster these primitive heavenly ghosts had come from, but their overall strength was even stronger than the heavenly ghosts in the valley who had cultivated. Since the first encounter between the two sides, these primitive heavenly ghosts had regarded the heavenly ghosts in the valley as their prey. They did not come for flesh and blood, but for the female heavenly ghosts in the valley. Hunting and reproduction were the instincts of primitive heavenly ghosts, and they would seize any opportunity to reproduce and strengthen their clan. Therefore, when they discovered the valley, they had tried every means to capture the female heavenly ghosts in the valley. Caught off guard, the primitive heavenly ghosts had captured nearly 1,000 females, and the rest of their clansmen had been killed in the fight. Today, Wu Qi saw that the heavenly ghosts in the valley had only sent a few young men to hunt for food, while the rest of the 300 or so young men had gone to the enemy's lair, trying to find a chance to rescue some of their clansmen. In the end, instead of rescuing their clansmen, they attracted a large number of enemies. If Wu Qi had not killed more than 1,000 of the enemy's heavenly ghosts, all the heavenly ghosts in the valley would have starved to death if they had stayed in the valley. In the outside world, the summoned heavenly ghosts could devour the natural energy to replenish themselves, so they did not need to eat. But in the ghost realm, although the air was filled with rich innate ghost energy, which was the source of all heavenly ghosts, it could not fill the stomachs of fully formed heavenly ghosts. They had to hunt and devour food. Only by devouring food could they gradually refine the innate ghost energy with the help of the food's blood essence and aura, making themselves stronger and stronger. Even the 13 great heavenly ghost kings had to devour huge amounts of food to sustain their lives in the ghost realm, let alone these heavenly ghosts in the valley, who were relatively weak in comparison. After understanding the ins and outs of the matter, Wu Qi stroked his chin as he looked at the heavenly ghosts in front of him, and he could not help but have some bad thoughts. There were 80 of them in one birth, and the newborn heavenly ghosts were already very strong. They could travel freely through the void and spit out vicious ghost fire. Among them, there was no lack of talented people who could cultivate to the realm of Gold Immortal and Primordial Immortal. They were a great source of soldiers. As long as their population was carefully controlled and their family planning was carried out, Wu Qi did not mind having an army of heavenly ghosts under his command. Especially since these heavenly ghosts had been living in the ghost realm all day long without seeing the light of day, they would surely suffer from mental illness. How merciful and virtuous it would be to bring them to Pangu continent and let them see the blue sky, the white clouds, the fresh flowers, and the green grass. He had to think of a way to trick these heavenly ghosts into his hands. After pondering for a moment, Wu Qi suddenly stamped his foot and roared furiously, "They are simply lawless. How dare those primitive heavenly ghosts do this? Lead the way now, and I'll wipe them out for you right now. Kill all the males and bring all the females back to be your wives." The hundreds of heavenly ghosts kneeling in the valley were stunned, and then they jumped to their feet at the same time and let out deafening cheers. Chapter 752. On the beach of the East Sea, 18 celestial fiend puppets stood in a straight line behind Princess Zhanglu. Some of these puppets were released by Wu Qi in Yuxiong Plain, while some were summoned back by Princess Zhanglu with a mystic technique Wu Qi had left behind. Years ago, when Wu Qi was attacked by Taoist Qi and Taoist Min with a primordial gold talisman, he had released these puppets and sent them to various places on Pangu continent to develop their own power. Later, when Wu Qi rescued tens of thousands of cultivators and immortals from the mines in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, he sent them back to East Sea City as soon as possible. After learning that Wu Qi was in some unknown place after the void was torn apart, Princess Zhanglu immediately summoned all the puppets and ordered them to bring all their subordinates, as well as all the natural treasures and money they had accumulated over the years, back to East Sea City as soon as possible. Thanks to the war between Yu and Myriad Immortal Alliance, the so-called chaotic times were the most convenient for people to profit from. These puppets had gathered tens of thousands of immortals and itinerant cultivators whose homes had been destroyed, and taken advantage of the fact that the military of Yu had no time to deal with them, to wantonly mine mineral veins and collect natural treasures, bringing back countless rare and precious items. Nearly 100,000 cultivators and immortals were now hiding in the Dragon Palace built by Lord Xianxing and others in the depths of the East Sea. Here, Princess Zhanglu was listening to the information brought to her by a few secret agents of Scouting Office. The 18 celestial fiend puppets stood behind her without saying a word, fixing their deep and merciless eyes at the few secret agents of Scouting Office. The tremendous pressure emanated from them made cold sweat roll down their foreheads, but their bodies were still as taut as steel wires, and they did not tremble or waver. The news of Wu Qi's disappearance had reached Zhong province, and as expected, Yu Mu was the first to jump out. He openly claimed that since Wu Qi had perished together with those vengeful divine beasts and had no heir to inherit his title, he should be stripped of his title of Marquis of East Sea Province and taken back the vast territory of East Sea Province. Yu Mu even suggested that since the East Sea Province was built from a large piece of land in Zhong Province should have jurisdiction over the East Sea Province. He also proposed to all the wealthy clans and nobles in Zhong Province that after the East Sea Province was taken back, all the wealthy clans in Zhong Province should send their elite disciples to compete for the power of prefecture overseer of East Sea Province, so that the East Sea Province, a vast and populous province, could not fall into chaos. Yes, the East Sea Province had a large population nowadays. After the human emperor issued an imperial edict to confer Wu Qi the title of third-grade Marquis of East Sea Province, the East Sea Province was included in the list of third-grade provinces in Diyu. A third-grade province should have its own style. At least, in terms of population, a mere few million people was not worthy of the title. Therefore, the officials of Diyu were busy migrating to the East Sea Province, and Gao was a good man to the end. In just a few days, thousands of his people had begun to move to the East Sea Province. No matter how one looked at it, the East Sea Province was a huge province with a land area comparable to several ordinary provinces, and its population was destined to grow rapidly. It was a big fat piece of meat. Even without Yu Mu jumping out to stir up trouble, the East Sea Province had already aroused the greed of countless people. But after Yu Mu's public outcry, many wealthy clans and nobles in Zhong Province began to chime in, asking Bo Zhongfu to quickly submit a memorial to the human emperor. If Wu Qi could not fulfill his duty as the prefecture overseer of East Sea Province, then the land of East Sea Province and the title of Marquis of East Sea Province should be taken back. What these spies brought them was the news that Yu Mu had colluded with many influential figures in Zhong Province in the past few days. With her hands tucked under her sleeves, Princess Zhongli looked calmly at the moon that was slowly rising over the horizon. "How could Wu Qi die so easily?" she said in a gentle voice. "I can feel that he is still alive, and he is plotting something bad." With a faint smile, Princess Zhongli said coolly, "But, since someone is courting death, let's teach him a lesson. We have to step up the assassination of Yu Miao's lineal clan members, increase the manpower, and kill everyone related to him at all costs, including the relatives of the servants and servants in his mansion. Kill everyone who is related to him." With a strange gleam flashing in her eyes, Princess Zhongli said in a cold voice, "Tell Brother Qingfen that all the manpower in East Sea Province is at his disposal. Except for our lineal descendants, all the immortals, itinerant cultivators, and mountain spirits and aquatic monsters who have been subdued by us are at his disposal. Do whatever you can to make Yu Mu suffer. Use the cruelest means to retaliate against him. Kill his male relatives, abduct his female relatives, and spread the news that Yu Mu's relatives have been tortured and killed as fast as you can. Let the whole world know that Yu Mu can't even protect his own relatives." With a grim laugh, Princess Zhongli clenched her teeth and said, "Kill those influential figures in Zhong Province who colluded with Yu Mu if you can, and kill those whose defenses are tight or whose overall strength is too strong to assassinate. Kill their children and grandchildren. In short, make them suffer. If their children and grandchildren are well guarded, poison the rivers in their territories, burn their farmlands and forests, destroy their underground energy veins, spread all kinds of plagues, and disturb their territories." With a flick of her long sleeves, 2 gusts of wind came whistling out and smashed a few large reefs on the beach. "Since they are coveting our territories, let us destroy them." Princess Zhongli cried out sternly. "No matter the cost, no matter the means, no matter the casualties, we have to deter them, destroy them, make them howl, make them fear, make them despair, and make them kneel before us and weep bitterly." A 5-colored divine ray towered into the sky from the top of Princess Zhongli's head. A terrible aura swept out in all directions, and an enormous and mysterious force enveloped the entire East Sea Province in a flash. Thunderclouds churned high up in the sky, and countless thunderbolts smashed in all directions, but none of them dared to get close to Princess Zhongli. A strange voice slowly came out of Princess Zhongli's mouth. As she chanted, swarms of locusts rose out of the ground, forming a large dark cloud that spread in all directions. Tiny, invisible toxins and plague viruses quickly multiplied in the air, spreading into the distance as Princess Zhonglu willed it. Invisible curses took shape in the void, and at the same time, the mountains, rivers, flowers, trees, birds, and beasts in the East Sea province began to make strange noises that mortals, cultivators, immortals, and even the oracles and warriors of Deyu could not hear. These curses spread in the air, quickly turning into ominous forces of disaster that struck at some of the people Princess Zhonglu had been thinking about in her mind. The ancient Tao of divinity? The divine meridians of heavenly wrath? The Tao of the god of scourge? Princess Zhongli's beautiful hair suddenly turned an ominous purple-red color, and her eyes shone with a magnificent red gleam that made one despair. As she recited the words in a low voice, a ring of purple-red divine light suddenly appeared amidst the five-colored divine light hovering over her head. Amidst the divine light was a shrine inlaid with gold and jade, in which sat a goddess, no more than 3 feet tall, who looked exactly like Princess Zhonglu, sitting proudly on the throne. Because of the tremendous pressure brought by Wu Qi's disappearance, and the great fury brought by Yu Miao and the others, the bloodline of the divine path in Princess Zhongli's body was stimulated. In that instant, she communicated with heaven and earth, broke through the current bottleneck, and formed the first golden body of the ancient god in the bloodline of the heaven god she had inherited. This golden body of the ancient god controlled the Tao of the scourge of the divine bloodline of the ancient gods, a terrible divine path that specialized in bringing all kinds of disasters to the world. As soon as Princess Zhonglu reached this level, she immediately mastered the 3 terrible powers of plague, and evil spirit curses, and immediately launched an attack on the enemies she had identified in her mind. As soon as these locusts were formed, they disappeared into the void after flying for tens of miles. Not long after, they appeared out of thin air in some of the provinces ruled by the rich and powerful families in Zhong province. It was the same for the viruses. They disappeared and reappeared out of thin air, spreading rapidly in some of the provinces. The invisible curse had even attached itself to some people, such as the few sons whom Yu Miao trusted the most, who were having a secret discussion with Yu Miao with a smile on their faces. They let out inexplicable howls and fell to the ground. Abscesses quickly grew on their bodies, and all kinds of strange diseases began to spread rapidly. Some even had a few hairy poisonous insects crawling out of their eye sockets. Yu Miao cried out in horror. He hurriedly cast a spell to save his sons, but the divine power of the ancient god of scourge was completely different from the spells of ghosts and deities he was proficient in. His spell was not the right one, and he could only barely control the diseases of his sons. How could he save them? A very interesting divine power. Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes and smiled. She looked at her own hands and giggled. The goddess in the shrine made of 5-colored divine light above her head laughed in the same way. But, while Princess Zhongli's laughter was crisp and charming, the goddess's laughter was filled with a gloomy and mysterious air, filled with the uneasiness and fear of an impending disaster. Gently stroking her long hair, Princess Zhonglu said coolly, "All right, go and deliver the order. It's settled. Don't let Yu Miao and others have an easy time. Make everyone's attention focus on them, and buy time for Marquis of Prefecture to come back." Her long crimson hair slowly returned to normal. After bowing deeply, the few secret agents of Scouting Office quickly turned into black shadows and vanished. Looking up at the sky, Princess Zhonglu frowned slightly and said, "A very interesting divine power, but I'm still too weak to deal with Yu Miao and others. I need stronger power. Sacrifice those immortals and itinerant cultivators you've gathered. This is all they can do." The 18 celestial fiend puppets bowed silently, then quickly turned into shadows and plunged into the sea. Princess Zhonglu frowned slightly. Before Wu Qi came back, she had to take care of Wu Qi's territory. Whoever dared to put their hands in it would have to be prepared to have their necks cut off by Princess Zhonglu. "How dare you take advantage of my husband? Are you all courting death? Hee hee, let me see if any of your daughters and granddaughters are beautiful." My husband doesn't even have a concubine until now. That's not fair to my status. How can my husband not have thousands of concubines? With her hands clasped behind her back, Princess Zhang paced slowly on the beach, her steps filled with a chilling, killing intent. It was a killing intent that was even more frightening than Wu Qi's rage. Chapter 753. Mount Hanyu, outside Zhongning City in Zhong Province. Inside a cave made of xianbing, Yu Miao stood beside a bed made of cold jade, his teeth clenched and his body trembling as he looked at his two sons, who were lying on the bed and howling in pain. His two sons had completely lost their human forms. They were handsome and charming, but now they had turned into two pieces of rotten, swollen flesh. Stinky pus kept dripping out of the black, rotten flesh. Some unknown worms were crawling in their bodies, and from time to time, soft chewing sounds could be heard coming from their bodies. The group of elders from Yu clan in Zhong province stood around the bed with unsightly faces, their eyes fixed on the secluded elder who was examining the injuries of Yu Miao's sons. For hours ago, when they were discussing with Yu Miao how to take over Dong Hai province, in front of everyone, Yu Miao's two sons suddenly fell to the ground with a wail, their strange injuries getting out of hand. Even with the abilities of Yu Miao and the elders, they could not save them, so they had no choice but to bring them to Mount Hanyu in a hurry and ask the secluded elder to save them. With a grave face, the secluded elder examined the bodies of the two injured men. Carefully, he extracted a part of the stinking liquid that flowed out of their bodies and tested the reaction of the liquid with several kinds of medicinal concoctions. In the end, he still could not figure out how the injuries were caused. After a moment of pondering, the secluded elder produced a jade knife and carefully dug out a wriggling bug covered with black poisonous stingers from their wounds. As soon as the bug, which was less than an inch long, saw the light around it, it immediately expanded to the size of a human head. Then it exploded into pieces with a loud boom, sending countless poisonous hairs flying in all directions. Yu Miao and the others were so frightened that they hastily made their move. Bone talismans of various colors produced a large curtain of light to protect everyone. The black, extremely sharp and fine poisonous stinger darted out, bumping against the light shield created by the bone talisman along with an ear-piercing swishing sound. The poisonous stinger was blown into pieces by the tremendous counterforce, turning into black smoke and disappearing into nothingness. Even the bug had turned into a wisp of smoke, slowly dissipating in the air. The secluded elder's face turned even more unsightly. He looked at Yu Miao with a very serious expression and said in a deep voice, "Who the hell have you offended? This is not the magic that we, the Directorate of Celestials, are familiar with. It seems to be the heavenly wrath cast by an innate deity who had mastered the great Tao of heaven and earth in the ancient times. All of the injuries, including these poisonous insects, are formed from divine power. They seem real yet not real, seem fake yet not fake." After sighing with emotion, the secluded elder shook his head and said, "The ancient Tao of divinity. They are the true gods who were born from the heavenly Tao and have the destiny in their hands. The Tao of ghost and deity used by the Directorate of Celestials today is not comparable to them. All of you know that the so-called ghosts and deities that we worship are actually just powerful demons from the outer realms. They can't be compared to the true ancient gods." Yu Miao's face twisted as he gritted his teeth and asked, "Is there any way to save him?" The secluded elder pondered for a moment and nodded seriously, "Of course there is a way to save him." Yu Mu was wild with joy. He quickly bowed and said, "Great-grandfather, please." The secluded elder glared at him and said with a cold snort, "Of course there is a way to save him, but it's a pity that I don't know it. Perhaps the secret palace of Diyu has the corresponding books and mystic techniques? But there is absolutely nothing in the Directorate of Celestials of Zhong Province. You should know that the imperial court of Diyu does have the bloodline of the ancient gods, but the descendants of these gods are all targets of Diyu. There can't be such a person in Zhong Province." The secluded elder's words disappointed Yu Miao, who was overjoyed. "Since you don't know the way to save him, why did you say that just now? Wouldn't that make me happy for nothing?" Looking down at his two sons, who were wailing in pain. Yu Miao's heart was bleeding. Although Yu Miao had many children, at least 100 times more than Yu Miao, who had taken away the power of the clan master, only a few of them could become powerful. It was especially true for a clan that belonged to the Directorate of Celestials like Yu clan. The strength of a clan depended on how many of its descendants had the ability to communicate with ghosts and deities, and cultivate magic and divine abilities. Among Yu Miao's many children, only 30% of them had the aptitude for cultivation, and only 3 of them had the aptitude comparable to Yu Miao. Of the 3 best sons, Yu Lei had been killed by Wu Qi, and these 2 were the only ones Yu Miao could count on to overthrow Yu Miao and regain control of Yu clan in the future. Although these 2 sons were young, they were cunning and resourceful, and had become very good assistants to Yu Miao in daily affairs. Their cultivation bases were close to the level of sun priests, and they could be considered as the best among the younger generation of the Central Plains. But he could only watch them howl and struggle in front of him, and watch their lives being devoured by an unknown vicious curse. The muscles on his face twitched as he asked dryly, "Great-grandfather, do you have a way to get the method to break the curse from the secret palace?" The secluded elder looked up at Yu Miao and asked in a flat voice, "Has the Yu clan of Zhong province ever had a relationship with the secret palace?" All the elders present shook their heads at the same time. They looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. How could a mere Yu clan of Zhong province have a relationship with the secret palace? On the other hand, the Yu clan of Liangzhu had a strong influence in the secret palace. But everyone present knew the relationship between the Yu clan of Liangzhu and the branch of the Yu clan of Zhong province represented by Yu Miao, and no one expected to get any help from the Yu clan of Liangzhu. Yu Miao cleared his throat and frowned as he looked at his son, who was howling in pain. "I heard that some of Yu Miao's immediate seniors hold a high position in the secret palace. If I just ask them to help me break the curse?" The secluded elder rose to his feet slowly, shook his head and sighed. "You can make your own decision. If you ask Yu Miao for help, you can forget about regaining control of the Yu clan of Zhong province for the rest of your life. The 2 best sons and the power of the Yu clan of Zhong province. You decide for yourself." Sighing deeply, the secluded elder walked slowly into the cave with his hands clasped behind his back. "Strange, the ancient Tao of divinity?" he murmured in a low voice as he walked. "Such a strange power. I've seen an incomplete ancient text when I was young, and it seems to be the divine power of the lineage of heavenly wrath? But, as for the divine power of the lineage of heavenly wrath, there are only a few descendants of the ancient bloodline of the Hanba clan and Shangliu clan who are worshipped by the secret palace in Yunao, and their divine power is completely different from what I'm seeing now." The elders of the Yu clan looked helplessly at the secluded elder's back, then turned to look at Yu Miao. Yu Miao sat down weakly on the cold jade bed. He stared blankly at his 2 sons, and tears suddenly rolled down his cheeks. He could not remember how many years it had been since he last shed tears. It seemed that he had not shed tears since he was 7 years old, when he killed a few disobedient servants with a curse for the first time. After so many years of ups and downs, he had always thought that he had a heart of stone, and that he would never be sad again. But now, it seemed that he had overestimated himself. A man does not shed tears easily, but only when he is deeply hurt. Tears were rolling down his cheeks at the moment, and his mind was in a mess. Who is the one who has plotted against my son? I've exerted all my strength, and even asked Lord Guishao to divine the cause and effect behind this, but why can't I find out who is the culprit? Who could have such a divine ability to block out all the karmic connections and prevent me from finding him? The elders were speechless. Not only had Yu Miao used all his strength to find the culprit, but they had also cooperated with him. Logically speaking, with so many sun oracles working together, even a supreme oracle could not completely block out the aura left behind by the curse. But they could not find even the slightest clue. Could it be that the culprit was an existence stronger than a supreme oracle? That was simply preposterous. Not to mention that supreme oracles were the representatives of the pinnacle of power in this world. Even if there was an existence stronger than them, why would he do this to Yu Miao's son? Why couldn't he just kill Yu Miao? The elders looked at each other and lost the ability to calculate. Yu Miao clenched his teeth and looked at his son, hesitating whether he should make peace with him. Perhaps he could only rely on Yu Miao's power to get help from the secret palace? But once he bowed to Yu Miao, the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province would never return to Yu Miao. As the secluded elder had said, it was up to Yu Miao to decide which was more important, the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province or the lives of his two sons. Just as he was hesitating, a few young oracles rushed in, bowed to Yu Miao in panic, and told him a lot of news that made his eyes turn red and almost drive him mad. First, the nobles who had colluded with Yu Miao and were preparing to dismember the East Sea province. Just an hour ago, a huge plague of locusts and a plague broke out in their territories almost at the same time. Huge swarms of locusts, each measuring more than 10 feet long, blotted out the sky and the earth, and in just a quarter of an hour, they had devoured almost everything edible in their territories. At the same time, more than 90% of the people in their territories were bedridden because of the plague. Second, Yu Miao's sons and daughters, as well as the descendants of many elders of the Yu clan, had been cursed by a vicious curse at the same time. In just less than an hour, several of them had turned into pus and blood and died, while some had even used various magical artifacts and magic to attack their relatives as if they had lost their minds. At the moment, the Yu clan's mansion in Zhong province was covered in blood. Third, many shops owned by Yu Miao had caught fire at the same time. A large number of precious goods had been burned to the ground, and a large number of shopkeepers and waiters had been killed. The loss was extremely heavy. According to the news gathered a quarter of an hour ago, Yu Miao was now destitute, excluding the money he had stashed in the vault in his mansion. One message after another, accompanied by the cawing of black crows, almost made Yu Zong faint. His body swayed as he roared, "The East Sea province must have something to do with Tan Lang. I won't let him go. I won't let him go." Yu Miao was driven mad, and he had fallen into a state of madness. It was clear that the plague of locusts was happening in the territories of those nobles who had colluded with Yu Miao, and it had nothing to do with Wu Qi or the East Sea province. Who would believe that? Yu Miao had made up his mind to destroy the East Sea province at all costs. Chapter 754. In the mansion of Yu clan in Zhongning City, the killing caused by the sudden madness of some of Yu Miao's descendants had been stopped. But, in just the time it took to finish a meal, more than 70 of Yu Miao's direct descendants had either been killed or committed suicide, and more than 1,000 servants and guards had been killed because of them. When one of Yu Miao's great-grandsons was in a frenzy, he used the flesh, blood, and souls of a few maids to summon the ghost god he worshipped. With the power of the ghost god, he almost slaughtered a private army of Yu clan that was passing by his house. 300 elite soldiers were easily killed by the ghost, and if it had not been for Yu Miao and the group of elders, the ghost would have turned the whole mansion into a land of death. The huge mansion was covered in blood. Standing on the high steps in front of the main hall, Yu Miao watched the frightened servants wash the blood away and clean up the broken pieces of flesh and internal organs. His brows were knitted into a tight knot. What happened this time was so bizarre. Suddenly, so many members of the Yu clan went crazy, and all of them were Yu Miao's direct descendants. It made Yu Miao feel refreshed, but at the same time, puzzled. Who was it that did this to Yu Miao's people? Although he was very happy that Yu Miao had lost more than 70 of his children and grandchildren, he was very annoyed that the blame might fall on his head if he did not handle it well. As the current clan leader of the Yu clan in Zhong province, Yu Miao had gathered a group of elders around him, and his power was stronger than Yu Miao's. Therefore, after quickly putting an end to the sudden killing and ordering the members of the Yu clan to keep the news under wraps, all the information was quickly fed back to Yu Miao. Yu Miao's sons were in big trouble. 2 of his proudest sons had been cursed and sent to Mount Hanyu for help. Even the shops and businesses under his name were burned down at the same time. It was a direct blow to Yu Miao's financial resources, and his whole family might have to live on porridge in the future. Wonderful! The question is, who did it? Yu Mu tilted his head and pondered the question. Even Yu Mu was not sure if he had the strength to deal such a heavy blow to Yu Miao in such a short time. Of course, Yu Miao's strength was much stronger than Yu Miao's, but he could only mobilize the members of the Yu clan in Zhong province. Once these people were mobilized, Yu Miao would be able to find out what they were doing and quickly come up with a countermeasure. Therefore, Yu Miao knew that he could not deal such a heavy and quick blow to Yu Miao. Could it be someone else from the Central Plains? Yu Mu shook his head again. Such strength was not something that any clan in the Central Plains could achieve. As an outsider, Bo Zhongfu had just straightened out the relationship in Zhong province over the past 2 years, and was busy holding the real power in Zhong province. So, how could he have the time to deal with Yu Miao? Besides, there was no personal grudge between him and Yu Miao. In that case, were they the branches of the aristocratic families in Liangzhu that Bo Zhongfu brought? That was even more impossible. After all, Yu clan was the local tyrant of Zhong province. After the former prefecture overseer, Feng Lingling, and many other influential clans in Zhong province were purged, Yu clan had become the largest native clan in Zhong province. Although these outsider clans were very strong, they were not as resourceful as Yu clan in all aspects. So, they could not have done such a thing without Yu Miao or Yu Miao's eyes and ears. Laughing conceitedly, Yu Miao shook his head and muttered, "They don't have the strength to do this either." Those aristocratic families brought by Bo Zhongfu are typical official clans, and they don't have such a strong overall strength. Just as Yu Miao was wondering who had done this, one of his trusted disciples hurried in, bowed to him, and reported in a low voice, "Grand Oracle, Ji Zixuan, the fiancé of Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province, requests an audience." Tan Lang's fiancé? Yu Miao looked at his disciple in astonishment, then almost jumped to his feet. "What did you say her name was? Ji Zixuan? Is that?" On Pangu continent, the surnames of ordinary people were extremely simple. They were nothing more than mountains, rivers, lakes, seas, flowers, trees, beasts, and birds. Even names could not escape from the category of all living things under the heaven. But the surnames of those aristocratic clans in the Yu dynasty had their own unique origins. Some of them came from ancient gods and almighty experts, some from ancient powerful clans, and some were branches evolved from some great surname. In the Yu dynasty, there was only one clan that used the surname Ji, and that clan was also surnamed Gongsun. But they would only use the surname Gongsun on formal occasions when they were offering sacrifices to their ancestors, ghosts, and deities. Usually, they met people with the surname Ji. This clan was the imperial clan of the current human emperor of the Yu dynasty, and the bloodline of this clan was the direct descendant of the human emperor, the Yellow Emperor, Xinyuan. Yu Miao felt his head spin when he heard that Wu Qi's fiancée was called Ji Zixuan. But, no matter how hard he racked his brains, he could not think of a daughter named Zixuan in the current human emperor's clan. After a long pause, he murmured in a low voice, "She has not returned to Liangzhu for hundreds of years. Could she be the daughter of some king? Could it be that some king has taken a fancy to Tan Lang's future and has betrothed his daughter to him?" Clapping his hands, Yu Miao smiled thoughtfully and said, "Wonderful. I see. If she is really the daughter of a king, it makes sense that Yu Miao was set up by someone." Glaring fiercely at his disciple, Yu Miao said in a deep voice, "Open the front gate and welcome her." "No, I'll go welcome her myself." Amidst the surprised gazes of his clan members and servants, Yu Miao strode toward the front mansion with a beaming face. His body swayed slightly, and he had changed into a pitch-black brocade robe, embroidered with dark patterns of mountains and rivers. It was a robe that the nobles of Diyu would only wear when they met the most distinguished guests. Upon seeing Yu Miao change into this robe, his trusted disciples and subordinates hurried to his side, lining up in Chi-Chi to welcome him. Outside the Yu family's residence, the number of guards at the entrance had increased by a few times due to the previous incident. There were now more than 2,000 guards blocking the entrance of the Yu family's residence and a large number of private guards patrolling the streets, preventing anyone from getting close. In the square outside the front gate, Princess Zhang Lu, dressed in a gorgeous palace dress and with her hair tied up in a high bun, was studying the front gate of Yu Clan like a goddess who had just walked out of the prehistoric times. She was dressed in gorgeous clothes, and her temperament was elegant and otherworldly. As a member of the royal family, she naturally exuded an air of nobility, which frightened the group of guards in front of her so much that they did not dare to look her in the eye. Little Kair, who had eaten and drunk her fill, stood blankly on Princess Zhongli's shoulder, her eyes staring blankly like a sparrow carved out of wood. Yu Miao strode out of the door and saw Princess Zhongli standing alone. He took a deep breath. Not to mention Princess Zhongli's beauty and clothes, just her noble temperament alone made his heart skip a beat. In particular, Princess Zhongli's temperament was so lofty that even some of the princes from the imperial clan whom Yu Miao had met in Liangzhu could not compare. Although she was standing alone, Princess Zhongli gave off the feeling of a god from the ancient times, who stood proudly in the world and did not allow anyone to offend or get close to her. Anyone who came before her was like an ant, and they could only worship and look at her. No one could have a fair talk with her face to face. This girl comes from an extraordinary background. The closer he got to Princess Zhongli, the greater the pressure he felt. When he was less than 30 feet away from Princess Zhongli, the pressure made him unable to breathe or walk freely. His soul seemed to be howling, forcing him to kneel before Princess Zhongli. Yu Miao turned to look at Princess Zhongli in horror. What was going on? He did not have such a strange feeling when he met those princes from the Yu's imperial clan in those years. Princess Zhongli put her hands under her sleeves, squinted at Yu Miao, and asked coolly, "Are you Yu Miao, the current clan master of Yu Clan in Zhong province?" As soon as she spoke, an indescribable air of majesty rose from her, and there was a sense of uneasy crisis hidden in it. The strange pressure made Yu Miao's heart convulse, and he nearly fainted from it. Yu Miao's cultivation base was much stronger than Princess Zhongli's, but his soul was far weaker than Princess Zhongli's. He was just an ordinary mortal. Even though his cultivation base had reached the level of a sun oracle, the essence of his soul was still that of a mortal. Princess Zhongli, on the other hand, had formed an innate divine soul, which made the essence of her soul much stronger than Yu Miao's. On top of that, she had recently formed the golden body of ancient god, which had elevated her soul to the level of a real ancient god. When the soul of a mortal faced the soul of a god, it was like an adult sheep facing a tiger cub. Even though Yu Miao's cultivation base was stronger than Princess Zhongli's, he could only surrender before the pressure emanating from Princess Zhongli's divine soul, and could not muster any thought of resistance. Faced with Princess Zhongli's question, Yu Miao bowed slightly and said, "Yes, I am Yu Miao. May I ask who you are?" "I'm the fiancé of Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province," Princess Zhongli said coolly. "I'm the fiancé of Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province. When he is traveling, I'm in charge of all the affairs in East Sea Province. Yu Miao is plotting against us in the East Sea, and I'm here today to discuss how to cooperate with you. I'll help you take complete control of the Yu clan in Zhong Province, and you will cooperate with me to kill all of Yu Miao's family members, as well as all his henchmen. Are you willing to do that?" Right in front of Yu Clan's mansion, in front of so many guards and private armies, Princess Zhongli nonchalantly mentioned that she wanted to kill Yu Miao, the current great elder of Yu Clan, and all his family members. Cold sweat broke out on Yu Miao's back. He hurriedly glanced around and gave his trusted subordinates a wink, then respectfully invited Princess Zhongli into the mansion for a detailed discussion. Princess Zhongli gladly accepted Yu Miao's invitation. Chapter 755. In the Great Hall of Yu Clan, Yu Miao dared not to take his seat according to the position of the host and guest. Instead, he placed two long tables in a straight line so that Princess Zhongli and himself could sit at the same level. The invisible majesty emanating from Princess Zhongli's divine soul had awed him, making every word and action of his become extremely cautious and respectful. Holding an exquisite jade teacup in her hand, Princess Zhongli took a sip of the fragrant tea, then narrowed her eyes at Yu Miao and said in a deep voice, "Do you have any other opinion, clan leader? Join hands with me, kill Yu Miao, and seize the power of Yu Clan. This is the cheapest thing we can do." Yu Miao grimaced, feeling very embarrassed. He wanted the power of Yu clan, and it was necessary for him to kill Yu Miao. But, in the current situation, once Yu Miao killed Yu Miao, it would inevitably lead to a backlash from the elders around Yu Miao. It was a trivial matter to kill Yu Miao for the power of Yu clan, but it was not in his interest to kill a group of elders and purge a group of Yu clan members for the sake of power. On Pangu continent, the overall strength of a clan depended on the members of its clan to maintain itself. The death of Yu Miao and a group of his children and relatives would not cause too much damage to the overall strength of Yu clan in Zhong province, but the death of a group of elders and about 70% of the members of Yu clan in Zhong province could completely wipe out the Yu clan in Zhong province. Even if Yu Miao were to seize the power, what was the value of such a broken Yu clan? Princess Zhang Lu stared coldly at Yu Miao with a slightly mocking smile on her face. Holding the teacup with both hands, she sipped the tea quietly and let Yu Miao make the decision. She looked down on Yu Miao a little. He had been the clan leader of Yu clan in Zhong province for hundreds of years, but he still could not take complete control of this small clan. His means and ability were really lacking. If any of the ministers of Great Yen had Yu Miao's strength, and with the support of the Yu clan in Liangzhu, it would take them at most 10 years to put them in their place. Princess Zhanglu sighed silently as she placed the teacup on the table. Princess Zhanglu rose to her feet, nodded at Yu Miao, and said, "Since you haven't made up your mind, clan leader, let's just treat it as Zi Xian's empty visit today." Princess Zhanglu pursed her lips like a sharp knife and walked out of the hall with her head held high. Frowning, Yu Mu rose to his feet and said in a deep voice, "Please stay. This matter concerns the rise and fall of Yu clan in Zhong province, and I have to investigate it carefully." Princess Zhangla gave him a sidelong glance, snorted softly, and continued walking out of the hall. Yu Mu was so angry that he wanted to slap the table and roar to vent his anger. But the enormous pressure brought by Princess Zhang Li's divine soul had shaken his soul, and he no longer had the courage to shout at Princess Zhang Lu. Yu Mu felt that he had never felt so aggrieved in his life. Years ago, he was considered a genius among geniuses in the Yu clan in Liangzhu. After many rounds of selection, he came to Zhong province when the clan leader was in trouble, and with the help of the elders of the Yu clan in Liangzhu, he seized the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province. For hundreds of years, he had suppressed the elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province who were unwilling to give up, and kept using the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province to collect all kinds of resources to feed back to the Yu clan. It was especially so in the case of Feng Lingling. Following the will of his clan in Liangzhu, Yu Mu had betrayed Feng Lingling in one fell swoop. As a result, it had brought Yu clan in Zhong province to a new height. Yu Mu boasted that he was one of the most capable officials of Great Yu, but in front of Princess Zhang Lu, she despised him so much. He could feel the deep contempt in Princess Zhang Li's cold snort and sidelong glance. No one had ever dared to despise him, not even Yu Mu, his archenemy. But this woman surnamed Ji. Yu Mu's grievance and anger vanished again. Princess Zhang Li's surname was Ji, and it was a surname he could not ignore. He bowed his head, clenched his fists, and gritted his teeth. All right, I'll think about Princess Zhang Li's request carefully. Should I cooperate with her and kill Yu Mu? Then, take complete control of the Yu clan? But how many members of the Yu clan will I have to kill? What will the other clans think of me if the notoriety of slaughtering my own people for the sake of power spreads out? It was true that the Yu clan in Liangzhu wanted him to take full control of the Yu clan in Zhong province, but would the elders in Liangzhu have a bad opinion of him if he seized the power by slaughtering his own people? Seeing that Princess Zhanglu had already walked to the door of the hall, Yu Mu, who was so upset that he almost threw his head back and howled. Why did everything go wrong today? Just now, there was such a big mess in the inner residence, and then the arrival of Princess Zhanglu had given him a big problem. Just as he was in a dilemma, Yu Mu's gloomy voice came through the door. Clan leader, I heard that you intend to join hands with a woman to kill me and take full control of the Yu clan? Ha ha ha, this is a plan that clan leader has been planning for many years, isn't it? Yu Mu's heart skipped a beat. What nonsense are you talking about, Yu Mu? He said with a cold snort. Princess Zhanglu stopped and stood proudly at the entrance, staring coldly at Yu Miao, who was hurrying over with a dozen elders of Yu clan. This was the first time Princess Zhonglu had seen Yu Mu with her own eyes. She twitched her mouth and snorted coldly, "What a terrible old man! He has neither the looks nor the temperament. How can such a lowly thing be an elder of a clan?" Secretly comparing him with those famous ministers of Great Yen, Princess Zhonglu found that Yu Mu really had nothing to boast about. He was nothing more than an old man with very poor morals and abilities, and because he was born into a good family, he had gained some power in Yu clan. If an old man like him were to stay in Great Yan's imperial court, it would not take him more than 3 to 5 years to be swallowed up by someone else. Yu Mu strode to the door, fixed his eyes on Princess Zhonglu, and snapped, "Are you that Ji Zixuan? Demoness, are you the woman of Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province? Hee, somebody take her down." The furious Yu Mu sensed the spiritual pressure emanating from Princess Zhonglu, and when he approached Princess Zhonglu he felt his heart palpitate. But Yu Miao was so furious that his blood was boiling. He was almost in a state of madness, so the pressure at the level of divine soul could not make him fear Princess Zhonglu as much as Yu Miao did. With the order, an elder standing behind Yu Mu, who looked like a bamboo pole, snorted coldly. Suddenly his eyes popped out about a foot long, and out of them shot numerous wisps of black light, which transformed into a large fishing net and enveloped Princess Zhonglu. The net came with a frigid air, and wherever it passed, the air was frozen into white snowflakes. If one was caught by the net, even the immortal soul of an ordinary gold immortal would be frozen into ice cubes and captured by anyone. Princess Zhonglu just stood where she was, looking at the elder of Yu clan with a very proud expression. Just as the fishing net was about to touch Princess Zhonglu, it suddenly shattered into pieces, and the elder's bulging eyeballs exploded into countless pieces of ice. Blood sprayed out of his sunken eye sockets like a fountain. The elder let out a shrill howl as he rolled about on the ground with both hands covering his eye sockets. All his magic and divine abilities were focused on his eyeballs, and yet, Princess Zhonglu had destroyed them without batting an eyelid. All his cultivation base had gone down the drain. A 5-colored divine ray shot out of the top of Princess Zhonglu's head, amidst which hovered the magnificent shrine inlaid with gold and jade. The avatar of the god of Scourge sat quietly in the shrine, looking down at Yu Mu and the others, who were dumbfounded. The primordial gods were the embodiment of the great Tao of heaven and earth, and they were the embodiment of the great Tao of heaven and earth. Attacking a god was equivalent to attacking the Tao directly, and one would be countered by the Tao. The first avatar Princess Zhonglu had condensed was the god of Scourge, the source of all calamities. When the elder attacked Princess Zhonglu, he was immediately attacked by the power of calamity. Although his eyeballs had countless magical abilities, they were still made of flesh and blood. Under the counterattack of the power of calamity, his eyeballs were shattered instantly. Princess Zhonglu did not even lift a finger, nor did she consume any magic power. She stood there like a mountain. If someone foolishly tried to hit a mountain with their head, they would naturally be smashed and bleed, but the mountain did not consume any energy at all. As soon as the avatar of the ancient god appeared, Yu Mu sucked in a breath and exclaimed in a low voice, "The bloodline of an ancient god? And she has condensed the avatar? How many years has it been since an almighty expert with a fully awakened bloodline of an ancient god appeared into you?" A strange gleam flickered in Yu Mu's eyes. He could not understand the meaning of a descendant of an ancient god who had fully awakened the bloodline of an ancient god. There was a temple of gods in every branch of the secret palace of Diyu, and its members were all descendants of the ancient gods who had awakened the bloodline of an ancient god in Diyu. But it seemed that even the first master of the Temple of Gods, the one with the strongest cultivation base in the whole Temple of Gods, had not condensed the golden body of an ancient god. Judging by the behavior of those crazy masters and elders of the secret palace, if they knew that there was an existence like Princess Zhonglu who had awakened the bloodline of an ancient god and condensed the golden body of an ancient god, they would most likely make Princess Zhonglu the master of the Temple of Gods. If I have the support of the master of the Temple of Gods, even if I kill Yu Mu and all of them, Yumu's eyes flickered as he stared at Yumu and the others with a deep killing intent. Yumu could sense the killing intent in Yumu's eyes. He gave him a cold look, then asked Princess Zhonglu through clenched teeth, "My children and the others." Not allowing him to finish, Princess Zhonglu said bluntly, "I did it. What are you going to do about it? How dare you plot to seize my husband's territory? That is a capital crime. This empress has already sworn that you, your henchmen, and all your relatives will be slaughtered to the last. Not even a blade of grass will be left." Yu Miao was taken aback, then he roared furiously, "Kill them all? How arrogant of you!" Before his voice could fade away, the five-colored divine ray hovering over Princess Zhongli's head transformed into 5 huge sword shadows and came whistling down toward Yumu. The golden body of the god of Scourge let out a deep roar, and all kinds of plagues, viruses, venomous bugs, and wild beasts rushed out of it, drowning Yumu and the others in a flash. Yumu took a deep breath. Suddenly, he pulled out a broadsword that was shrouded in a ghostly aura, which was obviously crafted from the spine of some giant beast, and swung it silently at Yumu's chest. "Yumu, how dare you try to murder me? You are unforgivable. You deserve to die 1,000 times for that. Guards! Yu Miao has gone mad and tried to assassinate me. Someone come and kill him as well." A monstrous killing intent towered into the sky from the Yu clan's mansion. Yu Mu, who represented the Yu clan in Liangzhu, and Yu Mu, who represented the Yu clan in Zhong province, had officially broken off their relationship. Chapter 756. Wu Qi had no idea what the furious Princess Zhonglu had done in Zhong province. He was leading 378 strong heavenly ghosts and his soldiers to the lair of the primitive heavenly ghosts. The heavenly ghosts were running hard on the ground, while Wu Qi was riding on Ao Buzan and flying over their heads. A few miles behind them, the Jade Armor Mystic Turtle flying ship was moving slowly, surrounded by dark clouds and thick fog. A bone-chilling wind was blowing. In the outside world, this kind of wind, which was unique to the ghost realm, was enough to blow the immortal body and immortal soul of ordinary immortals into nothingness. But in the ghost realm, this kind of wind was blowing all the time, so the creatures here were much stronger than the creatures in the outside world. Even those who were only in the realm of nascent divinity had fleshly bodies that were strong enough to compete with heaven immortals who specialized in body tempering. As for the heavenly ghosts who were leading the way down below, they could run at this speed for 3 days and 3 nights in a row. If they were willing to spend a little of their energy essence, they could run at this speed for several hours at a speed 10 times faster. As for the mighty heavenly ghosts, they could run at this speed for 3 days and 3 nights as long as their stomachs were full. They could not travel through the void in the ghost realm, for where innate ghost energy filled the air, they could not. The only thing they could not do was travel through the void in the ghost realm, for where innate ghost energy filled the air, they could not drill through the void. But as long as they were summoned to the outside world, they could instinctively master the divine ability to travel through the void to attack the enemy. But, relatively speaking, places filled with innate ghost energy were absolutely hopeless for ordinary immortals. Even ordinary gold immortals who strayed into the ghost realm could not fly through the innate ghost energy. The fact that the heavenly ghosts could run so fast here was a testament to their strength. It took these heavenly ghosts only 10 minutes to cover the distance of hundreds of miles. Ahead of them was a river that was hundreds of miles wide, and there was a rocky beach that stretched for thousands of miles. Jagged black reefs were piled up like the teeth of thousands of wild dogs. Among these reefs, some tall heavenly ghosts were madly colliding and fighting each other. From time to time, a powerful heavenly ghost would throw its companion to the ground, then excitedly grab the boulder next to it and hit its companion on the head. This was a very popular sport among the proto-sky ghosts. They would knock down their companions and smash their heads with boulders. The winner could enjoy the females and flesh to his heart's content, while the loser had to obediently hunt down and feed these powerful clansmen. There was a popular saying among the immortals in the outside world that the reason these primitive sky ghosts could develop intelligence after dozens of generations was because of this barbaric and bloody sport. By constantly being hit on the head by boulders, their brains would evolve, and their egg-sized brains would grow larger and larger, eventually making them smarter and smarter. It was a joke used by immortals to despise the heavenly ghosts, but Wu Qi couldn't help but agree with their actions. Those powerful heavenly ghosts beat the weak ones to their heart's content, and those weak ones were beaten to death every day. They had to find a way to defeat these powerful heavenly ghosts. When they could not defeat the enemy with physical strength, they could only use the power of intelligence to figure out a way to defeat them. Therefore, this had definitely accelerated the evolution of the proto-sky ghosts. In the huge rocky beach, thousands of heavenly ghosts were playing this game excitedly. More than 2,000 unlucky losers were pinned to the ground, and the victors were happily lifting boulders that were as wide as 100 feet and smashing them on the heads. The heads of these proto-sky ghosts were huge, at least as big as 2 or 3 water tanks, but their brains were only the size of eggs. Loud bangs rang out when the boulders hit their skulls, which were almost all bones, and sparks flew out from time to time. The scene of more than 2,000 heavenly ghosts being pinned to the ground and having their heads smashed by boulders looked very impressive, but it was also very funny. Wu Qi twitched his mouth and said nothing, but Huang Liang and the others in the jade armor mystic turtle flying ship were laughing so hard that their mouths were crooked. In the heart of the rocky beach, on a beach surrounded by black screen-shaped reefs, a group of young heavenly ghosts were feasting crazily. The longest of them was only about 30 feet long, which was about the age of a human child of 3 or 5 years old, while the smallest was only about a foot long, which meant that they had just been born. There was no such thing as respecting the old and loving the young among the proto-sky ghosts. The older heavenly ghosts were devouring the food crazily, and when a newborn heavenly ghost jumped up and took a few bites of the prey, the older ones would immediately beat and kick them. The 30-feet-long heavenly ghost was beating the 1-foot-long baby to its heart's content, just like a burly man beating a little hen. It was a funny and cruel scene, which made people speechless at the customs of the primitive heavenly ghosts. Next to these little heavenly ghosts, thousands of male heavenly ghosts were mating crazily with a smaller number of female heavenly ghosts. The huge bodies of these heavenly ghosts collided with each other, producing loud, dull noises as their hard bone armor and bone spurs collided with each other, and from time to time, dazzling sparks would shoot out. Occasionally, some heavenly ghosts moved too violently. Their long, powerful tails tore through the void like whips and struck other heavenly ghosts, often leaving behind bone-deep wounds. Some of the injured heavenly ghosts roared and jumped to their feet, and a fight broke out. But some heavenly ghosts were still clinging to the bodies of the female heavenly ghosts after being accidentally injured, trying their best to ram into them. This was the life of a proto-sky ghost. After eating and drinking, they would devote themselves to making the next generation. If nothing went wrong, they could lay 80 eggs at a time, and 80 offspring could be hatched at a time. As long as the proto-sky ghosts had enough nutrition, they could produce up to 3 eggs a year. In other words, a female proto-sky ghost could have 240 offspring in a year. It would only take them 10 years to reach adulthood, and then they could start reproducing. Therefore, if a pair of proto-sky ghosts, one male and one female, were thrown to an alien planet, it wouldn't take more than a few hundred years for the planet to be completely occupied by them, and all the living beings on the planet would become their food if there were no natural or man-made disasters. This was why the immortals forbade them from leaving the ghost realm at will. Even those who practiced the great art of heavenly ghosts rarely dared to let them reproduce in the outside world, for it would bring them great trouble. Among the thousands of heavenly ghosts who were reproducing, nearly 1,000 female heavenly ghosts were howling miserably. Clearly, they were not willing to do this. But the proto-sky ghosts pressing down on them were much stronger than them, and they could not resist at all. Amidst their shrill howls, the female proto-sky ghosts slammed into their bodies even more excitedly, tearing their skeletons apart and spraying out copious amounts of blood. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. The eyes of these female heavenly ghosts flickered with the light of wisdom. They should be the clansmen of the heavenly ghosts in the valley, the unlucky ones who had been abducted by these primitive heavenly ghosts as breeding tools. The heavenly ghosts leading the way stopped, straightened up, and looked at Wu Qi eagerly. These hideous heavenly ghosts stared at Wu Qi with tears in their eyes, as if they were puppies that had been beaten by their owners. There was a hint of cuteness in their ferocious appearance. Wu Qi patted Ao Buzen's head, signaling him to lower his altitude. Wu Qi looked at the heavenly ghosts and nodded. I can help you save your people, and all the female heavenly ghosts in this group will belong to you. But in the future, you will be my vassals. You must obey all my orders. The heavenly ghosts exchanged a glance, then prostrated themselves respectfully on the ground. Unlike their ancestor, who was infatuated with love, they would not offend a veteran ghost saint for the sake of a lover. The rule of the ghost realm was that the strong were respected. With Wu Qi's formidable strength and his promise to help them save their people, it was only natural for them to submit to Wu Qi. With the promise of these heavenly ghosts, Wu Qi threw his head back and let out a long roar. The flying ship of the Jade Armor Mystic Turtle emerged from the dark clouds and mist. It slowly flew over and hovered over the rocky beach. The primitive heavenly ghosts, who were beating their own people and carrying out their breeding plan, looked up at the same time and let out long, violent roars. Some of them could not wait to throw the boulders in their hands into the sky. The heavy boulders flew a few miles high and smashed accurately on the hull of the flying ship. But the boulders could not cause any damage to the ship. The boulders fell back to the ground the same way they flew up, and the primitive heavenly ghosts who threw the boulders were still looking up at the sky stupidly. So, all the boulders smashed into their faces and knocked them down to the ground. Wu Qi laughed, and so did Huang Liang and the others in the flying ship. 10,000 bone-piercing crossbows had locked onto the male primitive heavenly ghosts on the ground, and at Huang Liang's order, countless bolts shot out silently. Thousands of male primitive heavenly ghosts trembled and suddenly froze on the spot, unable to move. About a second later, tiny arrows of blood sprayed out of every male primitive heavenly ghost's body. Their internal organs were crushed by the powerful penetrating force of the arrows, and they were killed in an instant. The heavenly ghosts who had led Wu Qi and his companions here let out joyful roars. After kowtowing to Wu Qi, they immediately turned into afterimages and rushed toward the rocky beach. Roaring and talking at once, they rushed happily to the female heavenly ghosts who had been captured. The female primitive heavenly ghosts, who were having sex just now, stared blankly at their dead male clansmen, and when they saw the captured female heavenly ghosts happily hugging a group of strange males, these brainless female heavenly ghosts flew into a rage. Accompanied by shrill howls, thousands of female heavenly ghosts swooped down, intending to tear all the invading heavenly ghosts to pieces. Wu Qi smiled coldly. The dark Yin celestial tower flew out from the top of his head, unleashing countless streams of frigid star power that transformed into long, thick chains that bound all the heavenly ghosts. The hundreds of heavenly ghosts chattered with the captured female heavenly ghosts for a while, and then all of them knelt down before Wu Qi at the same time. All the heavenly ghosts prostrated themselves on the ground, their tails sticking close to the ground. It was a sign of their complete submission. Chapter 757. After rescuing the captured female heavenly ghosts and harvesting over 3,000 female proto-heavenly ghosts, all the heavenly ghosts in the valley burst into wild cheers. Unlike the human race, except for those who had cultivated to the level of Heavenly Ghost King or Ghost Saint, the members of Heavenly Ghost tribes did not have any concept of chastity. Although more than half of the rescued clansmen were pregnant, for these heavenly ghosts, it was equivalent to obtaining a batch of strong descendants for free, which was beneficial to the development of the entire tribe. As for the 3,000 female proto-heavenly ghosts, they were a windfall. As long as they were provided with enough food and kept safe, they could quickly expand the population of the entire tribe. Generally speaking, it was an iron law in heavenly ghost tribes that females obeyed males. Therefore, as long as the wild nature of these proto-heavenly ghosts was worn down, they would naturally be obedient and become the mothers of the tribe. While the heavenly ghosts were dancing and jumping around excitedly, Wuqi was scanning the lair with his divine sense. Suddenly, he found something strange in the depths of the lair. His heart raced violently, and he rushed toward it in a hurry. Under a black screen-shaped reef, there was a cave about a mile in circumference. This cave was the residence of the original leader of the proto-heavenly ghost tribe, and it was filled with countless strange things that these proto-heavenly ghosts had plundered. There were glittering stones, wooden stakes that emanated strange energy waves, some strange dried grass roots, and some strange things of unknown origin. In short, these proto-heavenly ghosts were the strongest force within 10,000 miles. When they hunted and plundered other heavenly ghost tribes, they would always find some strange things, which were kept by their leader as the property of the tribe. It was in this mountainous pile of rubbish that Wuqi found many good things that made him excited. There were about 3,000 thumb-sized, translucent stones that were as dark as ink and bone-piercingly cold. They were ghost relics condensed from innate supreme Yin energy and a wisp of innate ghost energy. This thing had a similar origin to the Buddhist Sarira. It could only be condensed with the help of the body of the sky ghost, which was full of blood essence. The innate supreme Yin energy and innate ghost energy merged into one, and after being swallowed into the stomachs of those powerful heavenly ghosts, they would absorb their blood essence and grow like parasites. These heavenly ghosts would gradually become thinner and withered, while these ghost relics would grow bigger and bigger. Ghost Sarira could contain almost unlimited spiritual power. It was the best material for refining all kinds of magic tools of the devil path and the ghost path. It was definitely the best material, not one of the best materials. There were more than 3,000 ghost relics here. Although the number was slightly small, it could definitely be used to refine a good spiritual offensive treasure. But what Wuqi wanted was not to refine the ghost relics into an artifact. The stones were born with extremely strong blood essence and mental power, and they were also the main ingredients for concocting the superior-grade gold immortal pill, the 3 quartz 9 transformations energy replenishing pill. The so-called 3 quartz referred to the upper, middle, and lower dantians. The 9 transformations energy replenishing pill was a pill that could greatly fill the essence, replenish the innate and acquired energy essence, greatly increase the strength of an immortal's divine sense, strengthen the immortal soul, and greatly transform a person's cultivation constitution. Even if a pig ate the 3 quartz 9 transformations vitality replenishing pill, it would become the best cultivation genius. If the over 3,000 ghost relics were used well, he could concoct at least 1,000 3 quartz 9 revolutions energy replenishing pills. There were so many disciples in the underhand sect, and if he chose a batch of reliable disciples from them and fed them with the pills, their cultivation progress would definitely be at least 100 times faster than ordinary immortals. After all, it was an superior-grade gold immortal pill. The 3 quartz 9 transformations energy replenishing pill was regarded as a strategic pill in the celestial court. Except for the disciples of those great heavenly venerables, celestial emperors, and important immortal kings and celestial lords, no one could ever see what this pill looked like. Ghost relics were only produced in the ghost realm. If the celestial court wanted to get enough of them from the 13 great heavenly ghost kings and 400 ghost saints, it would have to pay an astonishing price. According to the memories Wuqi obtained from immortal Ding Jun's divine soul, he could only gather 3 furnaces of materials every 100 years to concoct hundreds of 3 quartz 9 transformations energy replenishing pills. The more than 3,000 ghost relics before him were basically equal to all the ghost relics the celestial court had obtained from the ghost realm in the past 200 years. After happily putting all the ghost relics into his interstitial world, Wuqi rummaged through the pile of rubbish and found a black wooden stick that looked like a dragon, about 100 feet long and shaped like a dragon. The wooden stick was twisted and wriggling, and its trunk was densely covered with horny things that looked like dragon scales. When Wuqi gently flicked it with his finger, the sound produced was like a dragon's roar, crisp and pleasant to the ear, but it contained a hint of evil aura that could make one's divine soul tremble. This was the Yin dragon bone, which was rarely seen in the outside world. It was something similar to a fossil formed after a dead flood dragon fell into the ghost realm and was immersed in the innate ghost energy day and night. The Een dragon bone could be used to craft items, but it was also a supreme-grade ingredient for concocting spirit medicines. With just one Een dragon bone, he could concoct at least 3 to 5 cauldrons of Een and Yang dragon bone strengthening pills. The body of a flood dragon was vigorous and yang, while the innate ghost energy was extremely Een and evil. Both of them had reached a perfect balance in the Een dragon bone, and after being concocted into a bone-strengthening pill, it would have a very strong beneficial effect on cultivators who practiced various body cultivation techniques. Basically, a single Een dragon bone strengthening pill could make a nascent divinity cultivator possess a fleshly body that was not weaker than an 18th tier heaven immortal who specialized in body tempering. If it was combined with other medicinal ingredients, and the concoction technique was brilliant enough, a perfect Een dragon bone strengthening pill could make a nascent divinity cultivator possess the overall strength to fight against a peak stage heaven immortal who was a body cultivator. Both De Yu and the Celestial Court produced this kind of pill in large quantities. But, as the Een dragon bone was very rare, only the imperial guards of the human emperor in De Yu could enjoy it. In the Celestial Court, only the heavenly soldiers under the direct command of the great heavenly lord of the Celestial Court had the luck to be rewarded with this spirit pill. Similarly, the Een dragon bone could only be produced in the ghost realm. In order to obtain enough Een dragon bone, both De Yu and the Celestial Court had to make deals with the local tyrants in the ghost realm. At the same time, in order to maintain the continuous production of Een dragon bone, every year, a batch of demon cultivators who had just transformed into flood dragons would be secretly killed and thrown into the ghost realm. After tens of thousands of years, the corpses of these demon cultivators would turn into Een dragon bone. De Yu had a special dragon-raising pond for breeding flood dragon demon cultivators. Given the attitude of De Yu toward demon cultivators, it was understandable for them to do so. As the nominal authority in charge of all the immortals in the world, the Celestial Court dared not do so openly. But, in the cave abodes of some infamous celestial lords and celestial lords under the Celestial Court, they kept a large number of sealed flood dragons. When their cultivation base reached a certain level, these flood dragons would be slaughtered and sent into the ghost realm. Wu Qi put the Een dragon bone into his pouch. This 100-feet-long Een dragon bone could be used to concoct about 300 bone-strengthening pills, which was enough for Wu Qi to cultivate a batch of elites for the East Sea province. After all, it was against the harmony of heaven to exchange blood sacrifices for power from Lei Meng all the time. Secondly, where could Wu Qi find so many immortals to sacrifice? After all, the myriad immortal alliance had been destroyed. Could Wu Qi still go to outer heavenly realms to abduct immortals and itinerant cultivators? Happily, Wu Qi continued to rummage through the pile of rubbish, and before long he had found over 30 kinds of unbreakable treasures from this small hill of rubbish. Wu Qi was not interested in the materials produced in the ghost realm. After all, the materials produced in the ghost realm were most suitable for immortals who practiced the ghost Tao. Moreover, Wu Qi did not have the cultivation technique of ghost Tao, so it was useless even if he obtained them. However, all kinds of alchemy materials produced in the ghost realm were of the best quality, especially many of which could only be produced in the ghost realm of the Ninth Nether. The great heavenly ghost kings and ghost saints of the ghost realm were very strict about the sale of these materials. Some spirit pills that could only be refined with the specialty products of the ghost realm were very difficult to find in the outside world. And because of the characteristics of the innate ghost energy, the spirit pills refined from the materials produced in the ghost realm could either enhance the strength of the divine soul or temper the fleshly body, strengthening the fleshly body rapidly. These two effects were very tempting to both the Celestial Court and you. Therefore, these materials produced in the ghost realm were very rare in the outside world, and ordinary people had never even heard of the names of these materials and their corresponding spirit pills. It was already a pleasant surprise for Wu Qi that he could find dozens of materials that could be used for concocting pills in the rubbish of this former heavenly ghost tribe. In the next few days, Wu Qi directed these heavenly ghosts who had submitted to him to travel around, scraping the land within a radius of 10,000 miles and obtaining many materials of good quality. These natural treasures were useless to these heavenly ghosts, but to Wu Qi and the immortals in the outside world, each of them was a rare treasure. As the harvest increased, Wu Qi became more and more excited. For a moment, he forgot the problem of looking for a passage to leave the ghost realm and concentrated on collecting all kinds of rare treasures in the outside world. Huang Liang and the others did not dare to disturb Wu Qi. Although they did not know why Wu Qi collected so many materials that looked no different from rubbish, who dared to object to Wu Qi's action? Just as Wu Qi was about to expand the area of scraping tens of thousands of miles, the river near the valley where the heavenly ghosts lived suddenly changed. The sticky yellow water of the river tumbled up into the sky, and shrill howls kept coming from the upper reaches of the river. A terrible and solemn aura came sweeping over, and the shrill howls made people's ears hurt and their vision blacked out. Huang Liang and the others fainted immediately, and the heavenly ghosts dropped to their knees in fear. Amidst Wu Qi's horrified gaze, a shabby dragon boat slowly rose from the river several hundred miles away. A burly man clad in a crimson robe was standing on the prow of the boat, giving off an awe-inspiring air as he let out an eerie howl. At the same time, the man also noticed Wu Qi, who was looking at him from hundreds of miles away. He gave a deep roar, and the dragon boat quickly flew towards Wu Qi. Monstrous killing intent continued to surge. The burly man slowly raised the horse-slaying sword in his hand, which was about 10 feet long. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.